morning. Thank you all for your patience. I will now reconvene the general session. As you can see, Madam Chair Sloan is participating for today's meeting via Zoom, so I will get the honor of chairing today's meeting from in person at the Commission office. Will the recording secretary please call the roll?
Danette Brown. Here. Catherine Williams Brown.
Present.
Jose Cardenas.
Here.
Juan Cruz.
Here.
Christopher Davis.
Present.
Michael De La Torre.
Present.
Marisol De La Torre Escobedo.
Here.
Anna Marie Francois.
Present.
Makita Gwino Shire.
Present.
Megan Gross.
Here.
Johanna Harwick. Here. Susan Aradia. Terry Jackson.
Here.
Bonnie Clapp.
Present.
Monica Martinez.
Here.
Shireen Pottery. Present. David Simmons.
Here.
Tina Sloan.
Here.
Kimberly Weiss Smith. We have a quorum.
Right, thank you. I would like to remind members of the public about the process to provide public comment. The committee chair will announce when the public comment period is open during the presentation of the agenda item and ask for anyone who wishes to comment to notify the meeting moderator. Individuals who attend the meeting at the Commission office will need to submit a request to address the Commission card to the meeting moderator. The meeting moderator will notify the individual when it is their turn to speak. At that time, the individual will be able to approach the microphone and share their comment. Individuals who join the meeting via the Zoom webcast will need to click on the raise hand icon to inform the meeting moderator that they would like to speak on the item. The meeting moderator will notify the individual when it is their turn to speak by calling their Zoom ID. Please remember that the Zoom ID is the name used when logging into the meeting. At that time, the individual will be prompted to unmute their microphone and will be able to share their comment. Please note the Zoom ID name used by the member of the public to join the Zoom meeting will be displayed to the public when the individual provides public comment. Individuals who join the meeting via the U.S. toll-free number will need to press *9 on their phone to inform the meeting moderator that they would like to speak on the item. The moderator will notify the individual it is their turn to speak by calling their phone number and will allow them to unmute their telephone. At that time, the individual will be prompted to press *6 and will be able to share their comment. Please note only a partial phone number will be displayed to the public when the individual provides public comment. Okay, I now recess the general session and move to the Fiscal Policy and Planning Committee. Commissioner Klett, will you please convene the committee?
Let me try that again. Good morning. I now convene the meeting of the Fiscal Policy and Planning Committee. The committee has one item before it today. Item 3A is update on the enacted 2022-23 budget. It is an information item. Sarah Salee and Bridget Hansen will present this item. Ms. Salee, will you please begin?
Good morning. My name is Sarah Salee, and I am the Fiscal and Business Services Manager here at the Commission. I will be presenting Agenda Item 3A, which provides an overview of the Commission's key investments for the 2022-23 fiscal year. So on June 27th,
I'm sorry, if you can pause for just a minute. I think some people are having trouble hearing.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear me now? Okay.
So you have to just really raise your voice.
Oh.
So let's try to.
Okay. Good morning. Good morning. Okay. Good morning. My name is Sarah Saley, and I am the Fiscal and Business Services Manager here at the Commission. I will be presenting Agenda Item 3A, which provides an overview of the Commission's key investments for the 22-23 fiscal year. So on June 27, 2022, the Governor signed Senate Bill 154, which is also known as the Budget Act of 2022. Subsequently, on June 30th, 2022, the Governor signed Assembly Bill 178, which is also known as the Budget Bill Junior, and this amends the Budget Act of 2022. The Governor also signed Assembly Bill 181, which is the Education Budget Trailer Bill. And so these bills provide the Commission with the following items. So $24 million one-time general fund to waive the teacher examination and performance assessment fees. So this includes CBEST, CSET, RECA, TPA, edTPA, and APA. 2 exams were inadvertently left out, and that was CPACE and CTEL. We are working with the Department of Finance to get these exams added back in an upcoming Budget Bill Junior. The Commission also received 29 positions across all of our divisions. These positions include 9 positions for web portal and career counselors. So these positions will provide guidance for individuals seeking to make the transition to a career in the education field and to help navigate the credentialing process. 4 positions to support data collection and reporting. So these positions will work to gather data as well as research and analyze our programs, such as the California Statewide Assignment Accountability System, Cradle to Career, and our teacher grant programs. It also included 5 positions for grant administration. So these positions will serve to support our administration of grant programs to deliver funding to grantees. There's also 11 positions to support early childhood education, and that's the work across the Commission. So these positions will support licensure activities and regulation, legislative, and technological activities to support universal transitional kindergarten, as well as the expansion of the California State Preschool Program. I do want to note that in the agenda item under fee waivers, there is 1 position to support administration and fiscal coordination listed. That's an error, and we did not receive that position. And that concludes our 29 positions. In addition to our positions, the Commission also received funding for several grant programs, and that includes $20 million one-time general fund to select a local educational agency to serve as a statewide K-12 teacher residency program technical assistance center. $20 million one-time general fund to support a competitive grant program to develop and implement the integrated teacher preparation program. There's also $15 million one-time general fund to support the reading and literacy supplementary authorization incentive grant program, and then $1.7 million one-time general fund to support the Tulare County Office of Education to continue administering the California Center on Teaching Careers. And that's all of our grant programs. And so over the last 2 fiscal years, the budget also suspended all accreditation fees, including annual accreditation fees, as well as the cost recovery accreditation fees. The 2022-23 budget removed the provisional language to continue suspending the accreditation fees, and therefore the Commission will begin collecting accreditation fees again. If you would like to see additional details, you can find this on the Department of Finance's website. The link is also available in the agenda items electronic format. And these investments will allow the Commission to continue providing significant support for teacher preparation and development programs and to recruit teachers as they look to enter the education workforce. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those now.
I'm so used to hitting my mic button. I hit my mic button instead of my unmute button. Thank you for your presentation. We will now open for public comment. If there are members of the public that would like to give a presentation, please notify the meeting moderator by submitting a request card or clicking on the raise hand icon if participating through Zoom, or pressing *9 if participating by phone. We are going to limit public comments to 90 seconds on this item. Recording Secretary, are there any public comments?
We have no public comments on this item.
Okay, thank you. I'll give a moment just to make sure. Seeing no public comments, the public comment period for this item is now closed. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on this item? I keep trying to click the wrong thing here, but yes, I think I saw Commissioner Francois.
Thank you. I continue to be encouraged by the investments that are being made across the board in our field. And I'm also mindful of how our responsibility is to make sure that the administration of all of these funds is done with integrity and to advance the goals and missions of the state. One of the things that that I'm really concerned about is the undue financial burden on candidates. And a question has come up in the field, and this is for a staff question. I don't think that, I don't know who could answer this, that the fee waivers are reimbursable to students rather than they get some kind of a code and the fees are waived. And so we have some candidates who are saying that's untenable for them because they don't have the financial means to pay for the fees and then wait to, I believe the language in the PSD was until a later time. I think that our candidates deserve a little bit more clarity and some kind of process where they don't have to come up with the funding up front. So can someone explain the process for the fee waivers?
Ready? Good morning. Great question. Good morning. It is proven to be quite a number of considerations that we've had to move through to be able to provide the fee waiver. So much more complicated than you could imagine, but we are making great gains. We really had hoped to have this in place in July, and due to some discussions that were going on, it looked like we weren't going to get the fee waiver, then we got the fee waiver. So then we continued our approach to providing a fee waiver without having to reimburse candidates. Unfortunately, due to a series of things that have to be in place contractually, we're having to move contracts through DGS and get approval to be able to allow our contractor to provide a voucher. That is underway, and we have some support in the website itself. When the candidate goes in to register, there is information there that they may register, they will be reimbursed, and that soon the voucher will be available. With the way things are moving through the systems and with all of our wonderful support from our financial office, we hope to have this in place by the end of September. At that time, candidates who have paid, and it's a significant number, close to 28,000 registrations so far since July 1st, they will all be automatically reimbursed. At that time, a new candidate coming in will get a voucher. We're moving as fast as we can.
That is music to my ears. Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Amy.
Are there other comments? Yeah, Commissioner Hartwig.
Good morning. Thank you for presenting this. This also seems very heartening to me, the investment. I wanted to particularly focus on the $453,000 for 4 positions for the new data collection and reporting, and ask a question and offer my thanks if there was advocacy that went into having this included in the budget. I know that almost every meeting there's a wish list item that comes up about additional data that we would like to have to be able to make our decisions with the most information that we can. And it's extraordinary how much information the staff dredges up and provides to us, but we regularly come up with gaps. For instance, was it last meeting or the meeting before, we were talking about the state of the workforce and how helpful it would be to actually know why people leave their positions, so that we could look at exits as well as entrances. And we were discussing potentially creating a new survey and so on. And so I just wanted to check to see that these are the sorts of positions that might support those sorts of expansions. also to ask this, we may not have gotten into this far in the planning process yet, but I was curious about whether it's expected that these positions will be integrated into other parts of other departments that are already existing, or whether there's an idea that this is going to create a different sort of data analysis center within the organization. And I imagine Executive Director Sandy could speak to this. Thank you so much. I'm very excited about this.
Yes, ma'am. So are we. Very excited about this. We did describe the need that the commission has for this type of staffing to support the array of data collection and reporting that we do. And that is only on the increase, especially with all of the funded programs and the growth in our grants. For each one of these grant programs, there is an expectation that we are collecting data annually and reporting on what's happening with these grant programs. So we're grateful that the legislature and the administration recognized our need and staffed us in this way. We are working on whether we're going to integrate these positions across the agency or create a centralized unit within the agency, but those discussions are underway with us as we draft job descriptions, post them, and get ready to expand our capacity. So thank you for the question. And
thank you.
Commissioner Gross.
Thank you. Thank you for this item. It's so exciting to see money and investment in education. I wanted to get some clarity on the reading and literacy grants, since we spent a lot of time yesterday talking about literacy, and this goes through our conversation of it's not just learning when you're a brand new teacher, it's through your career. Does this incentive grant program also apply to folks pursuing a reading specialist credential, or is it just a supplementary authorization? Awesome, thank you.
So the grant that we will be dispersing is just for supplemental authorizations. However, we are partnering with CDE on a grant that they will be distributing that creates a technical assistance center in one of the county offices of education. So we're working closely with them to try and make it seamless and really build upon each other.
Oh, I do see a hand, a virtual hand. Commissioner Brown, do you have a question or a comment?
Lots of buttons to push here. Good morning, everyone. This is just an underline and a high five, actually a high 10. Really excited to see the substantial legislative and fiscal support of time, people, and resources for early childhood education. It really shows that the state across the board is really supportive of this new addition. And I will keep my comments brief.
Do any other commissioners have comments or questions? All right, those were great questions. I'm glad people asked them because I think it really did help us to see some of the behind the scenes and additional information that makes this an exciting item. I don't see any other questions or comments, so this is an information item and no action is needed. Thank you, Ms. Saley and Ms. Hanson. This concludes the business before the Fiscal Policy and Planning Committee. The committee is adjourned.
Okay, next is the Professional Practices Committee. Commissioner Hartwig, will you please convene the committee?
Yes, thank you. I now convene the Professional Practices Committee. The committee has one item today. Item 4A is the Division of Professional Practices Workload Report. Rachel Grzaffi will present this item. Ms. Grzaffi, will you please begin?
Yeah. Okay, just use that one. Okay, all right.
Sorry about that. All right, we'll get started here. Okay. I'll start over from our June statistics. The commission's dashboard reports on 6 key measurements in line graph form, which are attached to the agenda, showing both current year numbers as well as prior year numbers for comparison purposes. The total cases are the number of open cases within DPP, including cases in the intake unit, before the Committee of Credentials, pending before the Commission, and pending administrative hearing. At the end of June, the caseload was 2,681 cases, which is now starting to reflect a normal range of 26 to 2,800 cases, which was pre-COVID. Cases opened are new cases received during the month from all sources, including criminal, arrest notices, district reports, affidavits, and educators who self-report misconduct. In June, staff opened 433 cases, which is also reflecting the normal range of 400 to 500 cases open per month. The initial and formal review charts reflect the number of cases reviewed by the committee at its normal 3-day meeting. The 2-step process is required by statute. The committee continues to review fewer initial cases due to the overall decline of DPP casework. However, we do expect the initial review cases to increase to 90 within the next few months, no longer than 6. I expect that to be much sooner because all of our casework is returning to normal. Cases closed is the number of matters closed by commission action, committee action, or closed by staff where the commission is given formal delegation of authority. Single offense alcohol cases that do not involve schools, minors, or publicity. In June, 437 cases were closed, which is also starting to fall within the normal range of 400 to 500 cases per month. AG cases referred to cases in which educator requests an administrative hearing. Let me start that one over. AG cases refer to cases which an educator requests an administrative hearing to challenge the recommendation for discipline made by the committee. An administrative hearing is an evidentiary proceeding where an administrative law judge hears and rules on the evidence. The commission is represented in these hearings by the Office of the Attorney General. The number of cases where the AG is representing the commission is shown in the last graph, and this number is currently 143 cases. DPP is committed to work that is critical to the public service and the commission's mission. DPP continues to maintain a steady case production while at the same time ensuring quality case preparation for committee. That's the end of my presentation. Do any of the commissioners have questions?
Thank you, Ms. Grisafi. We will now open for public comment. If there are members of the public that would like to give a presentation, please notify the meeting moderator by submitting a request card or clicking on the raise hand icon if participating through Zoom, or by pressing *9 if participating by phone. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes each. Recording secretary, are there any public comments?
There are no public comments on this item.
Thank you. The public comment period for this item is now closed. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on this item? Looking for any virtual raised hands? Okay, well, I will take my prerogative then to ask my own questions. So, Ms. Grisafi, thank you for your presentation and for taking over this important role of reporting each time to the commission.
Thank you.
You have noted that the numbers we see going up are a return to pre-COVID numbers. And so my question I have, which I ask basically every time, is to check to see if the work capacity of the division is facing any challenges, or whether you expect to be able to maintain the same pace that you've come to expect, even though the numbers are starting to significantly increase back into the pre-COVID time.
At the beginning of COVID, we were able to reduce the cases that went to initial and formal review through committee because the workload wasn't there. Now that the cases have started to rise, that allows our casework and workload to move forward through committee, which right now we're sending an average of 75 cases through initial review. We have the expansion ability to send more than 100 cases through. So we have plenty of room to move through our normal numbers and get back to a consistent pace of workload processing.
Okay, thank you very much. We rely upon your reporting to keep us up to date on any workload challenges that you may be facing. And then I just wanted to offer my thanks to the division as well as to the Committee on Credentials. This incredibly important work is what we do to protect our children and our profession, and it's work that the public doesn't see for very good reason. It's confidential work, but it is work that is at the core of our mission, and we couldn't do that work without the strong management of the docket that comes before us. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Okay. This is an information item and no action is needed. Thank you, Ms. Grisafi.
Thank you.
This concludes the business before the Professional Practices Committee. The committee is adjourned.
Okay, thank you. Next is the Certification Committee. Commissioner Simmons, will you please convene the committee?
Good morning. I now convene the Certification Committee, and the committee has one item before it today. Can you hear me? Good. Okay.
You're supposed to be messaging. Whatever works for the student, you can sit there for today.
Okay. If this was to make this work, I have two devices, and moving all of them would be a little frightening to me.
Yes, I understand.
Okay. So the one item that we have before us today is item 5A, proposed regulations pertaining to credential requirements for the PK3 Early Childhood Education Specialist Instruction Credential. This is an information action item that will be presented by Erin Skubal. Ms. Skubal, please begin.
Okay. Can everyone see and hear me out there in the world? I know. I've never been a teacher. I do have two children though, so I will pretend like I am telling them to clean their room because they seem to never hear me when I'm saying that. Okay. Good morning, commissioners. Item 5A presents proposed regulations that define the broad credentialing requirements for the new version of the Early Childhood Education Specialist Instruction Credential that will authorize teaching from preschool up to grade 3. The item provides a summary of each section of the proposed regulation, as well as an appendix that includes the proposed regulation text in full. Since the publishing of the item, staff has identified a few small edits that should be included in the regulatory language, specifically in sections D and H. These edits are necessary to ensure that the proposed regulation definitions and around equivalencies are clear and that the references are accurate. So I'll go through those in detail as we walk through the regulation. And I am going to go through each section of the proposed regulation briefly. But before I do that, I do want to point out a couple things to you. So first, I wanted to acknowledge that during the June Commission meeting, concerns were raised regarding the Commission's authority to develop the new PK-3 credential through regulations alone. After the meeting, staff did a thorough secondary review of the Commission's statutory authority related to the creation of the specialist credentials. And we did confirm that creation of this credential in the proposed regulation is within the Commission's authority to set the requirements and the scope of the credential outlined in Education Code section 44225 and 44265. So those are the sections that we draw our authority from to create this credential. Second, I wanted to stress that this item only addresses the broad credentialing requirements that an individual must complete to apply for and be issued the new PK-3 credential. Approval of the framework for credential requirements is the first step in regulating this credential. The proposed regulation does not present the program standards or teaching performance expectations related to this new credential. The TPEs and program standards are only referenced in the regulation, and their full definitions will be brought forward for commission consideration at the October meeting. Separating the broad requirements and the programmatic specifics into two separate items ensures that the proposed standards and TPEs will address the literacy work that the commission is currently undertaking related to SB 488. So at this point, I'm going to briefly walk through each of the sections of the proposed regulation, starting with Section A, which describes the requirements for the preliminary PK-3 credential. These proposed requirements were endorsed by the Commission at its June 2022 meeting and include possession of a bachelor's degree, completion of a professional preparation program that includes 600 hours of clinical practice experience, passage of a Commission-approved teaching performance assessment, completion of the subject matter requirement, and passage of the reading instruction competence assessment. The proposed regulation allows the subject matter requirement to be met by one of two options. First is possession of a bachelor's or higher degree from a regionally accredited institution of higher education, where the degree major is in the field of child development or early childhood education. Or it can be met by completion of 24 semester units or the equivalent quarter units of non-remedial degree applicable coursework at a regionally accredited institution of higher education, or that coursework is in early childhood education and or child development. Section B describes the requirements to earn the clear PK-3 early childhood education specialist instruction credential, which includes completion of either a commission-approved teacher induction program as described in subsection 2A, or possession of a valid national board certification in early childhood / generalist as described in subsection 2B. The professional preparation program models that may lead to the issuance of the preliminary PK-3 credential are outlined in Section C. These program models include integrated undergraduate teacher preparation programs, combined community college, BA and or post-BA teacher prep programs, post-BA teacher preparation programs in and of themselves, and teacher residency programs and intern teacher preparation programs. The section also provides specific details on the requirements for an intern teacher preparation program that mirror existing intern teacher preparation pathways for single subject, multiple subject, and education specialist. Section D describes the requirements for granting equivalencies for the clinical practice program requirement and requires a program of professional preparation to waive at least 200 hours of the required clinical practice experience in a PK or TK setting for experienced PK teachers. Programs may choose to grant equivalents for an additional 200 hours of the required clinical practice experience in a PK or TK setting within the program of professional preparation for a total of 400 hours waived. Such candidates must complete all other program requirements, including a clinical practice experience of at least 200 hours in a K-3 setting. This option is available to candidates that meet both of the following requirements. First, they need to hold either a valid child development permit at the teacher level or higher, or verify employment as a teacher in a Head Start child care and development center serving preschool-aged children. And they need to also verify 6 years or more of satisfactory full-time teaching experience as a teacher in a public or private center-based child care and development program. And that experience must be serving preschool-aged children. It needs to be either a license-exempt preschool program operated by a California local education agency or must be licensed under the provisions of Title 22. This section also includes definitions for satisfactory teaching experience and full-time teaching experience to ensure that only candidates that have the requisite experience can be granted this equivalence. As I mentioned earlier, staff recommends that Section D be slightly modified for clarity of the employment requirement for equivalencies. So the suggested edits are for subsections 1A and 1B3. Specifically, the suggested edit to subsection 1A would read as follows. Either 1, hold a valid child development permit at the teacher level or higher, comma, or 2, verify employment as a lead teacher in a Head Start program, comma, Or 3, verify employment as a lead teacher in a childcare and development center serving preschool-aged children. Proposed edits to subsection 1B3 would read as follows. Lead teacher means an adult who has direct responsibility for the care and development of children from birth to 5 years of age in a center-based early childhood care setting, comma, and serves in a teaching capacity with 3 and/or 4-year-olds. Again, commission staff recommends that the proposed regulation be approved with those modifications. Moving on to section E. This section provides a pathway for fully credentialed multiple subject credential holders to obtain the PK-3 credential through an expedited pathway, where they would verify completion of the 24 units of early childhood education coursework or possession of a BA degree in early childhood education or child development. Section F provides the authorization statements for the PK-3 credential, including the self-contained PK-3 authorization for content instruction and the English learner authorization. I do want to clarify that this credential would be eligible for an individual to earn a bilingual authorization. So while we don't need to specifically include that in the regulations, it is an option based on existing regulations. Section G defines the period of validity for the PK-3 credential and aligns with the regulations for single, multiple, and education specialist credentials. Both a preliminary and clear PK-3 early childhood education specialist credential is initially valid for 5 years, while an intern credential would be valid for 2 years. And then the final section of the proposed regulation is section H, and it provides details on what must be submitted to the commission in order for an application to be issued for the PK-3 credential. It includes the application processing fee and satisfaction of fingerprinting and professional fitness review. This section also has suggested edits from the proposed language that's in your item. Specifically, that's for subsections 2 and 3, and that's to ensure accurate references. So subsection 2 should be edited by changing the reference of B1 to B2 Roman numeral 1 or little letter I. And subsection 3 should be edited by changing the reference of B2 to B2 Roman numeral 2 or II. Hopefully that's clear. It's just a cleanup to make sure that the appropriate sections earlier in the regulation are included there. So that covers all section of the proposed regulation. As I stated at the beginning of my presentation, the second half of the regulations packet that includes proposed regulatory language to define the teaching performance expectations and program standards for the PK-3 credential will be brought forward in the October meeting. At this point, staff recommends that the commission review and adopt the proposed regulations as amended here at the table for the credential requirements so that staff can begin to build the rulemaking packet for submission to the Office of Administrative Law. The completed packet would be submitted once the commission has also approved the TPEs and program standards. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, it doesn't look like there's questions, so we will now open for public comment. If there are members of the public that would like to give a presentation, please notify the meeting moderator by submitting a request card or clicking on the raised hand icon if participating through Zoom, or pressing *9 if participating by phone. We are going to limit public comment to 60 seconds, and that will be up on the blue sky timer for you to help everybody maintain their rhythm. Recording secretary, are there any public comments?
Yes, Harold Acord.
Hello, everyone. I hope that everyone can hear me here and in the out in the ether. My name is Harold Acord. I'm speaking on behalf of the 300,000 plus members of the California Teachers Association. I am a behavior intervention teacher, aka student success coach in Moreno Valley, California. Our letter can be found attached to the agenda online. The California Teachers Association is supportive of the regulatory language as proposed in this item. We oppose any efforts to prescribe the type of EC units required to fulfill the subject matter requirement. It bears repeating that our roughly 126,000 members with the multiple subject credentials already hold authorizations that include the PK-3 grade span. They have already completed subject matter requirements and clinical practice for a credential that includes the PK-3 grade span. We urge the Commission to retain the flexibility in the regulations as written and not impose costly and unnecessary barriers for educators interested in focusing their careers on the needs of our youngest learners. Thank you for your attention.
Renee Marshall.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to see you today. I have to tell you, I was watching online yesterday and I just had to be here. So I hopped on a plane this morning at LAX. I just booked it last night, but I'm coming from the California community colleges, and I serve as a consultant in a variety of our colleges across our system. And I'm coming here today because I want to say thank you. We've been engaging in a lot of conversations and a lot of just discussions over the last couple months. And I want to just say thank you for listening. Thank you for having going to all these different places and spaces and continuing the conversation. And I also want to let you know, many of us who are leading teacher prep in the community college system are incredibly hopeful in this moment, and we're ready to get to work. So that's all I wanted to say, everybody. We're here in partnership. Let's do it. Okay. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Samantha Thompson, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hello, can you hear me? Great. Samantha Thompson, she, her pronouns, Associate Director of Early Learning Policy with the Education Trust West. We appreciate the progress made toward development and implementation of the PK-3 ECE Specialist Credential and hope that it will support stronger alignment between early learning systems and elementary education. The existing early educator workforce are knowledgeable and experienced professionals. As such, policies and practices should build upon the existing infrastructure in a manner that centers equity. We would like to see more inclusion of experience supporting DLL's home language in an assets-based way. Literacy. We're glad to see included and support experience-based pathways and recognition of prior experience with waiving of clinical practice hours, and would like the Commission to elevate the need to support pathways and support for the PK-3 specialist credential can currently attain a bilingual authorization. And we'd like to see the renewal of the bilingual teacher professional development grant.
Thank you very much.
Luis Molina, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hi there, good morning. Luis Molina, Policy Analyst for Early Edge California. On behalf of Early Edge, I would like to thank the Commission for its continued work to develop the infrastructure for the PK-3 credential. Early Edge greatly supports these efforts and is excited to see a credential to help prepare educators to work in an early learning setting. We are glad to see that a recognition of previous experience in early learning has been factored into the credential through the waiving of a portion of clinical practice hours should a candidate have satisfactory experience. The recognition of previous experience is critical to supporting equitable pathways in the early learning and care field, as well as meeting the increasing demand for TK teachers. Early Edge would like to see further inclusion of competencies and educator experiences that support dual language learners and biliteracy in asset-based way. We recommend adding language within the section that defines satisfactory experience that calls out experiences in the home language in early learning settings, as well as supporting family engagement. Thank you again for your hard work to make a PK-3 credential a reality in California. We look forward to continuing this important issue.
Elena Montoya, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hi, I'm Elena Montoya with CSECE. Coming out of a process that was on track to provide an equitable pathway to the credential for ECE teachers, we're extremely disappointed by final recommendations. The proposal no longer includes an expedited pathway for EC teachers akin to that for private school teachers for the multiple subject credential. Instead, it adds requirements that are not asked of private school teachers who may apply for a credential without completing a preparation program, clinical hours, or a TPA. Although the majority of ECE degree programs cover content through grade 3, this proposal reflects an assumption that early educators are not getting proper education and that their preparation is inadequate to teach TK through 3rd grade. Accepting only lead teacher experience misses that ECE co-teachers and administrators frequently share responsibility. We recommend specifying qualifying responsibilities rather than using job title. This proposal also excludes home-based providers, over 5,000 of whom have a bachelor's degree and are more likely to be women of color. As written, this proposal will cement a deficit perspective of ECE and communicate that the experience and education of thousands of women of color with degrees in early education is deemed less credible than teaching older children.
Thank you.
Jessica Sacco, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Good morning, Commissioners. Jessica Sacco on behalf of Children Now. I'd like to thank the staff for their hard work on developing these regulations. I would like to suggest that in Section C, relative to the preparation program models, that the Commission consider adding a 6th pathway to include apprenticeship programs. That was something that was considered and included in previous discussions by the work group and other documents. And while we recognize there may not be models like that in existence today, it is the hope that those kinds of models will be available moving forward. Additionally, I'd like to align my comments with previous speakers to support of dual language learners. And finally, I'd like to flag a concern around requiring 200 hours in the K-3 setting for those individuals who are coming in with a child development permit, as this may disrupt the expedited need for TK teachers. Thank you.
Fulton Hess, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hi, can you all hear me? Okay. So my name is Hopton Hess from CSCCE, and we have provided full written comments, but would like to highlight a few specific concerns. The requirement of 200 hours in a K-3 setting remains a barrier because it requires early educators to leave their places of paid work to complete these hours. The requirement for a center to provide a satisfactory assessment of performance could place current teachers in a vulnerable situation. What if their employer is facing a staffing crisis and is reluctant to support the teacher moving? What if the person does not want to let their employer know they are considering leaving for TK because they fear losing their job or other issues? We recommend to make this requirement more expansive to allow a previous employer within the last 2 years to provide an assessment of performance akin to the private school pathway. We have also heard recommendations for ECE teachers to utilize the district intern pathway. Pathways are appropriate for new teachers. They do not mitigate barriers for early educators. Both still require a teacher to complete a preparation program, and in the residency program will require teachers to leave their paid jobs for a stipend that is less than the current median center-based teacher wages. We do not object to multiple pathways for people to earn the PK through 3 credential, including preparation programs and clinical hours for pre-service and novice teachers. We do, however, assess the exclusion of a direct pathway to the credential for experienced early educators equivalent to that available to private school teachers to be inequitable.
Thank you very much.
Manuel Buenrostro, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hi, Commissioners. This is Manuel Buenrostro with Californians Together. And as we're really excited about this new PK3 specialist credential and support the work that has been done thus far. As you know, 1 in 4 of students in kindergarten through 3rd grade is an English learner. many more come from households that speak a second language other than English at home. So meeting the needs of our English learners and dual language learners is critical within these programs. That's why we align ourselves with the comments made earlier about making sure there's additional language for dual language learners and family engagement. We also support the apprenticeship model idea pathway the children now provided. And moreover, as this new credential is implemented, we would like to see the commission elevate the need to support pathways and support for candidates that are receiving this new credential to also concurrently attain the bilingual authorization. So we would like to see the commission elevate this a little bit more. As you know, this might require guidance and support for candidates. It might also require supporting IHEs to be able to have the staffing and faculty in place to offer these credentials. Thank you again for your wonderful work on this item, and have a great rest of your meeting.
Thank you very much.
Jan Fish, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm glad to be here today too. I'm co-lead of Peach and Professor Emerita at CSUN and in the ECEMA program. We at Peach have supported and worked with the commission for 12 years now for an ECE credential. We remain concerned about the access and equity for candidates, both in the child development route and the multiple subjects route. The access and equity for candidates from child development meet clinical practice definitions that may not meet 6 years of requirement at full time. We wish the CTC to clarify this. Also, multiple subject candidates with 24 that may be scatter plot may not get the essential preparation and mentoring by ECE-centric supervisors to have their TK experience robustly qualify and prepare them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Donna Cecil, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hi, my name is Donna Cecil. I'm an adjunct faculty in child development at San Diego Mesa College. I also serve as the Vice President of Public Policy for Tri-CECE. I would like to offer support for the written comments submitted by Peach and CalBAX. As written, the current proposed credential lacks subject matter competency in child development, early childhood education. Only requiring lower division, unspecified child development, early childhood education courses will not provide credential candidates and current credential holders with the strong knowledge and skills necessary that support our youngest learners. I argue that current credential holders do not have the necessary depth and breadth to teach our youngest learners, as they have not completed a robust early childhood foundation and do need to engage in specified study that will support our youngest learners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eden Haywood Bird, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hello and good morning to the Commission. My name is Eden Haywood Bird. I am the chair of the Cal Poly Pomona Early Childhood Studies program. I want to thank the Commission for their work on the early childhood credential, which I do support. And thank you for adding pathways that provide a pathway for folks who have prior experience. My concern has to do with the 24 units for multiple subject folks. 24 units that are so unspecified do not provide the robustness for multiple subject teachers to be adequately prepared for the unique challenges and needs of California's youngest learners. Specifically, looking at the TPEs for multiple subject, it's easy to see that dual language learning and authentic partnerships with families is missing from those TPEs. And without strengthening these requirements to provide specific coursework related to teaching dual language learners and providing those authentic partnerships, as well as a developmental framework for the orientation of content, multiple subject teachers will not be as successful as this commission hopes they will be. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sue Young Jane, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hello. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Sunyoung Jang, an assistant professor at Cal Poly Pomona. I would like to share my experience when I was doing my PhD at the University of Toronto. During the time, I met with a teacher who was teaching in a full-day kindergarten program where a co-teaching model was adopted. She had a teaching certification, which was equivalent to the multiple subject credential here in California, and she worked with an early child educator in the same class. While talking with me, she started crying, sharing her frustration as a teacher of 4- and 5-year-old children. She said, "I don't know how to help my students. They don't sit still, and they are everywhere. They cry when they're dropped off. But my early child educator is so good. She knows how to support them. She comforts them and invites them to different activities that she sets up each day. I'm so lucky to work with her." As a former early child educator, I could see where the problem was coming from. She just didn't have the foundation in early child development and pedagogies, so she did not know how to support children's development and learning holistically. Her classroom could not function without the early child educator, who was paid much less than her and who was not invited to regular teacher meetings. What can we learn from this story? We can get it right from the beginning by centering early child teachers in the PK3 credential. And one of the ways to do it is to require a BA in child development.
Thank you very much.
Which provides a strong foundation in early child theories, research, and pedagogies. Thank you so much for your time to listen to us.
Nancy Hurlbut, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Sure. Hi, I'm Nancy Hurlbut. I'm an emeritus professor at Cal Poly Pomona, co-lead of PH, co-lead of coordinator of the CalBACs. I want to just underscore what Eden and Donna said, that 24 units in early childhood is not sufficient to prepare people to teach 4- and 5-year-olds, that we really need at least to specify, we need upper division and a baccalaureate in child development. I also would like to support the speakers who have talked about the need for DLL credential. Thank you very much, and I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you.
We have no additional requests for public comment.
Okay, the public comment period for this item is now closed. Do commissioners have any questions or comments on this item? Seeing no questions, which is just amazing to me. Okay, Marquita.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to pause a moment and remark about the work that has come heretofore, and thank the staff, thank the work group. Mary used a term yesterday, resetting, and it seems like that is what we have done. We have not tinkered around the edges with this work, as some of our colleagues have remarked. I think I am so hopeful that we have responded to the urgency of this early childhood workforce. We have brought together our colleagues and have developed a framework that I think is going to result in a high quality workforce. And what I'd like to do is move approval, if I may, of this item.
Do I see a second? Okay, are there any questions? Because I have one. Okay, in the discussion of requiring a TPA, I know many times the commission has not wanted the TPA process to be duplicative. So if I was a multiple subject, well, okay, I have a multiple subject credential. If I were to have 24 units of early childhood or a child development permit, would the regulations as currently written require me to do another TPA?
Okay, can you hear me? So the answer is no. The regulation as written would not require a fully prepared multiple subject credential holder that also has an English learner authorization to take an additional TPA.
Now, the other question I have is, in terms of reducing barriers, the basic skills requirement under these regulations will be met by the bachelor's degree, so that if you are a current child development permit holder, you will not be required to take CBEST.
That is also correct. The bachelor's degree requirement would include any basic skills knowledge that was deemed necessary. Yes.
The other question I have is, in the budget, there was money for integrated programs, including this new credential. One of the speakers spoke about the need for support at the university level or college level. Can you speak to that at all?
So I wouldn't be able to speak to that, but perhaps one of my colleagues might be able to come up and share how that support might occur. I see David coming up. And it looks like Mary might have something to add as well.
So we worked with legislative staff to make sure that the integrated grants could be used for developing these programs. We think it's a really good opportunity for someone, especially someone who hasn't completed, obviously, a bachelor's degree, that they can go in and complete both the degree and get their certification.
Some of my district's employees that are currently working in state preschool are in exactly that position, and it would be lovely if we would be able to hire them sooner rather than later in the full paid positions that our multiple subject teachers get. Okay, the other question that the callers called about was the 200 hours. Could you speak maybe to what the 200 hours would look like if I was to hire one of my state preschool people as a TK teacher? What as under an internship program, what would that look like in terms of the hours?
So in an internship program, they would be the teacher of record, and the time as teacher of record would count for that. If they're in a TK classroom and need that, in TK classroom, they'd have the K3, and that would count as K3. So they would be set.
And I have one more question. There was a whole lot of discussion under 130 when we had to deal with what is liberal studies, integrated studies, all of those things. And I know that for early childhood, there are multiple degrees. How will these regulations allow us the flexibility to have early childhood studies or early childhood education or whatever the title would be that is appropriate?
Trying to toggle between unmute and the text of the regulation. So give me just a minute, David. But yes, let's see. The regulation text specifically says possession of a bachelor's or higher degree from a regionally accredited institution of higher education with a degree major in the field of child development or early childhood education. Now, those are lowercase, so they're not specific titles, so it needs to be in either of those fields. So there is some flexibility for evaluation to ensure that it aligns with either child development or early childhood education field.
Are there any other questions? Executive Director Sandy.
Thank you, Chairman Simmons. I just really want to appreciate the moment that we're in and the intensive collaboration that we've been engaged in for the last year and more, really for the last several years. But this got real with the establishment of transitional kindergarten as a universal opportunity for all of our 4-year-olds on a timeline that is very exciting, to say the least. And the immediate need for a workforce that is well prepared to work in this space became a guiding rod for us here at the commission table to bring all the work we have been doing together and to move it forward in a way that is informed by very different perspectives around the table. And we've heard all of them reflected in our comments today. A commissioner who will remain unnamed once said to me, if you haven't pleased everyone, you've probably landed in the right place. All right, so that was a, you can chuckle a little bit right there if you'd like. That was meant in jest. But the truth of the matter is we're building something new. It is not exclusively a multiple subject credential or a pre-K credential. It's a combination of both. And it draws from both of those fields and brings them together in a way that could be very dynamic for this state. That was what was intended in the Master Plan for Early Learning and Care, is that we get very serious about what happens in the 3-to-3 space and that we do that exceptionally well so that every child has the opportunity to benefit from their K-12 education. This is an equity agenda. This is an access agenda. This is the opportunity to put a credential out there that brings these communities together. The child development community who have the knowledge of child development that is desperately needed in the building of these programs, and the teacher education faculty who have the knowledge of clinically based teacher preparation. We need these communities to come together and to build us programs the likes of which we've never seen, to credential teachers that are the envy of all. All right, to give our 3-to-3 students the absolute best foundation we possibly can. That's the vision of the Master Plan for Early Learning and Care. And our job here at the table has been to try to bring all of these different points of view to bear to have an impact on what we do. The perfect is the enemy of the good, right? And prior testimony at this table from Deborah Stipek, who's flying back from Germany and couldn't get here as fast as Renee Marshall did today, but would be here if she could, has said all along, and she said at your last meeting, we have the start. We have a good start. This is a good plan, and we can build from it. In some of my meetings, I met with the CSU education deans, and sometimes I may lean into an almost religious fervor about this, and forgive me, it's been many decades of work trying to get here. And thank you, Nancy, for reminding us of the number of years we've been working together on this. What the commission does with this credential sets the floor. It does not limit you from doing exceptionally good work. So please pick it up and do it. That's really the call. I so appreciate the different communities that have come to the table here and said, emphasize and amplify the work with dual language learners. Emphasize and amplify the work with families. This is a central core piece of the professional work in early childhood education that may not get us as much attention in the preparation of our multiple subject teachers as it needs to until now. Because if we build it, then it will begin to infuse and infect the rest of what we do in ways that are very, very good for the system. So, commissioners, I appreciate that we're here at this moment to get the infrastructure for a credential established. The next meeting is going to be a very robust set of discussions when we bring the standards and the performance expectations back. And we are in continued discussion with the different communities who have a view on what is missing, might be missing there, and what needs to be there. And we commit to you that we will bring you our best effort to reflect the views as well as we can without so overwhelming standards that are 50 pages long per se, that preparation programs can't pick them up and do anything with them, all right? So there's a tension between being comprehensive and being workable, and we're trying to hit that balance point. But the conversation is not over with regard to what needs to animate this credential structure, and that comes in the standards that we're working on, including the literacy standard that we talked about yesterday that will be right there in those standards. So to our community college faculty, to our four-year college faculty, the Peach community, the California Baccalaureate faculty, to our colleagues at UC Berkeley and the Center for Child Care Education Studies and Workforce. We appreciate you continuing to push on the issues of access. And what we as your staff commit to doing, commissioners, is to get as close to expanding access as we possibly can, while we make sure that this credential does the job of adequate treatment of early childhood education, pre-K, and early childhood education K-3. So thank you for letting me have just a moment to mic drop now. I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Will the recording secretary call for the vote? Each member please respond with aye, nay, or abstain.
Before I call the vote, can I know who seconded? Because so many hands raised.
Monica.
It was Marquita was the motion. Monica was the second? Danette was the second. Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay. Danette Brown.
Aye.
Jose Cardenas.
Aye.
Juan Cruz.
Aye.
Christopher Davis.
Aye.
Michael De La Torre.
Aye.
Marisol De La Torre Escobedo.
Aye.
Makita Beno Shire.
Aye.
Megan Gross.
Aye.
Johanna Harwick.
Aye.
Terry Jackson.
Aye.
Bonnie Clapp.
Aye.
Monica Martinez.
Aye.
David Simmons.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, motion carries. And I just would like to say thank you to Aaron and all of our people who have worked so hard on this. And I look forward to October because I want to start hiring interns in May. So we need to really start, get this going here. Yeah, that's right. So having no additional items today, I adjourn the certification committee.
Okay, so everybody, we are going to take a 10-minute break and then we'll return and start off with the Educator Preparation Committee. So I'll see everybody again at 10:10. All right, everybody, we're gonna get started. You can find your seats, please. All right, everybody, welcome back. Next is the Educator Preparation Committee. Commissioner Martinez, will you please reconvene the committee?
Good morning, everyone. Sorry, let me take myself off mute and put myself on camera. Before we move to my agenda item, I just want to go back to Aaron Scoble for a point of clarification for the most recent conversation we had in early childhood. Aaron, are you?
I'm here.
Oh, switch sides on me and I don't know what to do. Thank you.
Thank you. So I do want to make a quick point of clarification related to Commissioner Simmons' question about the clinical practice experience placement. And Director DeGeer had mentioned transitional kindergarten as meeting the K-3 placement experience requirement. So technically the way the regulation is written, it does specify that there is a 200-hour requirement for a pre-K/TK setting and a 200-hour requirement for a K-3 setting. So TK, while it is the first year of a 2-year kindergarten program, it would not qualify to meet the K-3 200-hour clinical practice experience. So I just wanted to put that point of clarification out there for everyone at the table and out there in the public.
Great. Thank you for doing that. And with that, I will now move to reconvene the Educator Preparation Committee. We have 2 items for today. We'll cover 2D and 2E. We will take 2F. Well, we're going to do 2F at a later commission meeting, but members of the public who are wishing to comment for this item, you can still do so during the public comment period when we reconvene the general session later this morning. So we're going to go ahead and move on to 2D. Our first item for today is 2D, revisiting The Cal APA Standards Setting Study Findings and Passing Score Recommendations. This item is being presented by Gay Roby, Amy Reesing, and Heather Klesch from the Evaluation Systems Group of Pearson. This is an action item, Commissioners. Ms. Reesing, will you please begin?
Good morning, Commissioners. It's great to be here with all of you, and we are back to talk about performance assessment. So this item, as it was introduced, is going to focus on the CalAPA, our administrative services performance assessment that preliminary candidates need to take and pass to move forward along with their coursework and clinical practice to receive that initial credential. So this agenda item is split into 3 components. And we can go to the next slide. So the first component will focus on an update of the development and implementation of the CalAPA and talk about that work that has unfolded over the last 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. We are going into our 5th year of operational administration, which is kind of hard to believe, really. It's quite a lot of work, and we're very excited that we're moving forward in the way that we are and that candidates and programs are doing so well as they engage in this work. So we want to share that with you. We'll then move on to the second component and talk about the standard setting process that we engage in to ensure that our passing standards, in fact, will result in supported work with our candidates. And then finally, our third component will look at how we will continue to provide technical assistance and support to programs and candidates and build that community of learners around what we need our beginning administrative services candidates to know and be able to demonstrate. And that will conclude the item. And with that, I will turn it to my colleague, Gay Roby, who will begin by explaining about the CalAPA and the development and implementation. Gay? We cannot hear you, Gay. You need to unmute.
The famous thing to do, right? Don't unmute. Component 1 does cover the development of the CalAPA and the first years of implementation. With many topics underneath. We're going to talk about the pilot and field testing phases, non-consequential and consequential operations, description of the cycles and the rubrics, as well as our assessors and the commission adoption of the passing score that occurred in 2019. Starting with the timeline, it's hard to believe it has been 10 years that we have been looking at the development of the CalAPA. So in 2012, the commission approved both the program standards as well as the concept of an administrator performance assessment. It was funded in 2014, which began a 2-year development phase, which was followed by a pilot year and a field test year until we got it just right for our first operational year. 2018 and 19 saw both non-consequential candidates who had to take the exam but were not subject to a passing score, and consequential as well, which means they had to pass it and reach a passing score, started in 2019. We've had 4 years of implementation, as Amy said, 2018 through 2022. A little bit about our leadership cycles. We have 3, and they represent 3 distinct tasks that a school administrator is asked to do in California education currently. So leadership cycle 1 asks candidates to analyze 3 years of data in order to inform some effort in school improvement while looking at promoting equity at the same time. Leadership cycle 2 asks them to step out of their role as teacher or counselor or nurse, whatever their baseline credential is, and take an active role as a leader and lead a community of practice of 3 to 4 members in some kind of educational reform. And like leadership cycle 3 asks them to take on the role of coach and go through a full reflective coaching cycle and support a volunteer teacher in the classroom. Leadership cycle 1 has 8 rubrics, while leadership cycle 2 and 3 has 7 rubrics, which is important to remember when we look at our scores. Obviously, cycle 1 has a little bit higher score because it has 1 additional rubric. Moving over to the right-hand side of the screen, you will see our recursive steps. Each one of the cycles follows the same 4 steps. First, we ask them to investigate. The one at the top, We ask them to look at what currently exists before they go in and offer some change, to really inform themselves on what the current practice is. Then they develop a plan, act upon that plan, and then finally they reflect upon their learning during that cycle, as well as themselves as an equity leader. The CalAPA is assessed through a series of analytic rubrics, which means rather than a holistic view, we offer them parameters for each one of our rubrics. This is 6 of the 8 rubrics, because that's what fit on the screen, for our essential questions. They're posed at the top of each rubric. So you will see it gives the parameters for the candidate, and they provide a written response, a video of practice, or maybe artifacts such as meeting agendas, meeting minutes, lesson plans, and student work. Looking at the analytic rubrics, we provided them for you. If you're interested in looking at them in the agenda item on page 4 in the first paragraph, you will see links to the assessment guides. And cycle 1, it's on page 14, and cycles 2 and 3, it begins on page 18. But for our discussion here, you'll see the essential question should be listed at the top. I've truncated it for fitting on the screen again. And there are 5 levels to the rubric. If a candidate addresses exactly the essential question component parts, does nothing more, nothing less, they will get a level 3. The question turns itself into statements for level 3. You will see there are 2 what looks like paragraphs, but they're really sentences. Those are called constructs, and that's how they are graded, where they have to address all constructs within a level. Should they provide additional above and beyond information, they can raise their score levels to level 4 or level 5. And then oppositely, they can forget a few things and receive a level 2 assessment score, or forget a lot of things, or maybe not address some things and receive a level 1. We have been in existence for 4 years now, and the data that was presented to the studies group session were studies scores through fall 2019 through April of 2022. Most of our programs follow a leadership cycle consecutively, so 1 is done in the fall and 2 and 3 in the spring. So you'll see the numbers are quite higher for leadership cycle 1, because we did cut it off in April, so we missed 2 or 3 windows where cycles 2 or 3 would have come in. So that's why they're about 1,400 points or submissions lower. They are assessed by trained qualified assessors, so we have eligibility requirements for them. We are currently using a statewide assessment. There is an option for institutions to do a local assessment of each of the submissions, but none of our institutions currently are using that, so they use our statewide group. Our assessors are trained. They have to submit an accurate assessment of a sample. They are employed year by year, but they also have to keep on going with refresher training and validation training, so that they remain true to the rubrics and true to what we are looking at as we implement the CalAPA. And at this point, I will turn it over to Heather to discuss the standard setting process.
Thanks, Gay. Good morning, commissioners, and thank you, Amy and Gay, for having me here to contribute to this item. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes.
Great, perfect, thanks. As the technical contractor for the Commission, Evaluation Systems is responsible for the preparation, convening, facilitation, and reporting of the standard setting activities for the Commission's teaching performance assessments and the administrator performance assessment. So component 2 of this agenda item describes that standard setting process, and it begins on page 5 of your agenda item. And it was understood by the panelists that by being part of the standard setting process, that their recommendations would be brought to the Commission, but be represented as just that, recommendations, for which additional considerations might be discussed, and ultimately a passing standard established as determined by the Commission's action. And we definitely thank all of those panelists for participating. On the next slide, The Commission's assessment design standards require the conducting of a standard setting study to establish the requirements for successful completion of an assessment. And as described on page 5 of your agenda item, standard setting as a term is the common term used in large-scale assessment industry to describe the process of determining a minimum passing score for a new or a revised assessment. That term standard, as it is used in standard setting, refers to a performance standard or a minimum level of acceptable performance on an assessment. Standard setting is a common and established process for determining valid and defensible minimum passing scores for standardized assessments. And these activities then contribute overall to the validity evidence that we gather in developing or maintaining the CalAPA program. For criterion referenced assessments, such as the CalAPA and other examinations within the California examinations programs as well, standard setting is a content-focused, structured process in which a panel of education experts review the content of the assessment. They carefully consider the performance expectations being measured. They review relevant data, and potential pass rates at various scores are presented to them to make an informed judgment about the minimum performance level that an administrator candidate would need to demonstrate to pass the assessment. This panel of experts for CalAPA were convened in May earlier this year, and the expert judges involved in the process are listed in your Appendix B, which is on page 16 of your agenda item. And of note, we did have an APA standard setting back in 2019, and you'll see that a number of the attending panelists this year were also members of that 2019 CalAPA standard setting panel. On the next slide, the specific standard setting process used for the CalAPA is described in full detail in Appendix C. And all of the expert panel's standard setting discussions for the initial and their final recommendations that were made at the conclusion of day 2 of the activities were framed by these context statements and guiding questions. Think about an administrator credential candidate who is just at the level of knowledge and skills required to perform effectively the job of a new administrator in California public schools. So the question is, what score, or the sum of all of the rubric scores within that cycle, represents the level of performance that would be achieved by this individual? That question followed us throughout the proceedings. I think panelists were tired of hearing me say it over and over again, but it's important that you ground them in this framing of the context. And so that guiding question addressed candidate performance across all of the rubrics, but for each of the 3 cycles. So this question was asked individually for each separate cycle. In this question, we focused on the framing of being just at the level of knowledge and skills. So not well above and not well below, but just at. We also framed this as a new administrator in California, so not somebody who has been on the job many years and has learned on the job. And we also frame this as the score that represents the level that would be achieved, as you see here, as opposed to should be achieved. Should is often aspirational. Everybody should do this, they should perform in this way, but how would they do, given where we are? So discussion was conducted to allow for panel recommendations also concerning any kind of side conditions. For example, placing a limitation on the number of rubric scores of 1 as an example that would ultimately be allowed under the final recommended passing score. The next slide. Through a facilitated discussion, panelists were presented with CalAPA candidate performance data. And the data that we utilized, as Gay mentioned, at the standard setting included candidates' CalAPA performance during the consequential administration years to date. So that was 2019 through April of 2022. And again, just reiterating that we used consequential candidates as part of this data set and did not include non-consequential candidates. All of the consequential candidates that submitted a CalAPA Cycle 1, 2, or 3 were included in the data. So they didn't have to have completed all 3 cycles. Individually, we included their data. These data are all provided to you in Appendix E. And the candidate performance data show a higher number of submissions, as Gay mentioned, in Leadership Cycle 1, which is expected. And just to reiterate that Leadership Cycle 1 has 8 rubrics, while Cycles 2 and 3 have 7 rubrics. So we would expect to see a higher mean or average score for Leadership Cycle 1, as you see here. But across the 3 cycles, we do see comparable average rubric score performance, around a score of 2.8 per rubric. And as Gay mentioned, a level 3 represents addressing all components of the essential questions for the rubric. So again, strong performance. On the next slide 14, the activities that we described in Appendix C were conducted, and each panelist then recommended an initial passing standard during our early activities on day 2. This table shows panelists' initial passing score recommendations, which show the leadership cycle. So you have cycles 1 through 3, the total points possible for each of those cycles, the panel initial passing score recommendation, and the number of panelists recommending a side condition of no more than 1 rubric score of 1. The next slide, we then moved through a facilitated discussion. And after examining the initial recommendations, panelists were presented with what we call CalAPA impact data, which reflect the number and percent of administrator candidates who would theoretically pass at each potential recommended level. These data are found in Appendix D of your item, beginning on page 21. And in general, the findings do show strong and comparable candidate performance when viewed by gender, ethnicity, language, and school setting. Slide 16 on the next slide. Just to conclude component 2, standard setting, as I mentioned, is an iterative process. So we go through a lot of steps throughout the 2 days, and we bring different pieces of data to our panelists as we go through. We bring evidence and information that are presented to the panelists throughout the proceedings. And throughout the 2 days, panelists had an opportunity to discuss the data. They had an opportunity to discuss their own personal recommendations, their own personal experiences, and it was a rich discussion. And out of this comes their own individual panelists' recommendations and a discussion around the inferences of the impact data on their recommendations. So it's important to note that we don't just present data and ask folks to independently in silence make recommendations. It is a dialogue across panelists about what they see and what their experiences are and what their concerns or their congratulations may be based on that data. So this table really represents the outcome of all of those discussions when we ask panelists to then make a final independent recommendation for their passing score on the CalAPA by individual cycle. The table shows the final passing score recommendations from the panelists as a whole, and they are highlighted then in the modeled pass rate tables that begin on page 10 of your agenda item. So those modeled pass rate tables show the application of these panel recommendations and what percent of candidates would pass by race and ethnicity at a cut score of 15 for Leadership Cycle 1 and a cut score of 14 for Cycles 2 and 3. And recall again that the 2 leadership cycles, Cycles 2 and 3, have 1 fewer rubric as compared to Cycle 1. So therefore, there's fewer points possible for a candidate to obtain. So these final passing score recommendations, which are actually higher than the current passing standards in place, do result in an approximate about 97% or higher pass rates for candidates. So with that, I'm going to hand it over now to Amy Rising, who will cover component 3.
Great. Thank you, Heather, for walking us through the data. And we just wanted to make sure as we wrapped up this item with you that you are aware of all the technical support that we provide to our programs and our candidates. So just quickly, you can see that we are offering weekly office hours to candidates. We directly speak with them about any concerns, issues, questions they might have, support they might need. We have office hours also for our PASC programs, which are preliminary administrator services programs, and then also for our CLEAR programs, our CAS programs. So as candidates move on, we also have time for them to talk with us about how to support candidates that might have left during the pandemic, their preliminary program without their performance assessment and are now in their clear program and need support. So over the last 2 years, we ramped up and pulled them into our support strategies. We do what we call deep dives, where we walk through every cycle. We record these presentations and then post them on our YouTube channel so people can access them at any time. We've begun a new coordinator orientation because, as you know, people switch positions all the time in the field. And so we have new people coming in to help support the CalAPA, and we want to be there for them as well. So we offer new coordinator orientation. We have one coming up in September on the 30th. We also have a really important conference coming up each year. We have offered what is now called the Meredith Fellows Implementation Conference. We bring all of our performance assessment programs candidates into dialogue to build that community of learners. And we have a great agenda coming up on September 16th and 17th. There is no fee associated with this conference. This year it is still all online, and we hope next year to be in person. And we have a keynote this year. Aide Rodriguez will be joining us as our keynote, and we are very excited that she has been kind enough to agree to speak to us. So I invite all of you to please be there with us. It's on a Friday and then also a Saturday morning, and lots of great opportunity to hear how performance assessment is going in California. After that, we will move into our fall and winter. We do additional coordinator meetings where we do bring updates on data and how candidates are doing and what programs can focus on. We're meeting twice a year. Now with programs during the pandemic, we met with them 4 times a year because we wanted to mitigate any impact the pandemic was having and be there to support our programs. And then we additionally offer Digging Deeper online webinars to help get everyone together and continue building that community of learners. So lots of great events coming your way, all of you, on performance assessment. We do want to move on next to our next slide, which is our staff recommendation. And staff recommends that the commission discuss and determine passing scores for CalAPA leadership cycles 1, 2, and 3 with a consideration of side conditions and whether those should be applied or not. We also would like to determine an enactment date for when these new scores would go into effect. We want to make sure there's enough lead time for everyone to be prepared, given that the recommendation has been to increase the passing scores slightly. So we'd like to have you engage in that conversation. And then finally, we'd like your direction in how you would like us to continue to collect and study this candidate data. And then hopefully you would want to invite us back in 2 years to share that data with you so that we can make sure that, again, we're setting the right passing standards. So with that, I will just wrap up with next steps. So should you adopt passing standards, revise passing standards perhaps for each of the cycles, we of course would provide this information on all of our websites and listservs and ways that we support our programs and candidates, including our exams website that Evaluation Systems hosts. And then we also need that revised passing standard that is adopted perhaps today to be applied, and when would we apply it, by what date? So with that, I will turn it back to our chair and see if there are questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much to all of your staff for a comprehensive review of this. We're now going to open for public comment. If there are members of the public that are here, please submit the request card to the meeting moderator. If you are on Zoom, please click the raised hand icon or press *9. We are going to have a limit of 1 minute. As a reminder, the first alarm you hear is like a 20-second warning, and the second alarm you hear is actually the end of your public comment. Recording secretary, are there any public comments?
Mari Gray, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Thank you, Commission. My name is Mari Gray, and I'm an associate professor at CSU East Bay and member of CAPIA. I want to speak in support of the passing score recommendations of the standard setting panel. I want to acknowledge the Commission for consistently responding to recommendations from the field of educational leadership, and to appreciate the teamwork of CTC staff, including Director Mary Sandy, Amy Rising, and Gay Roby, who've worked closely with the program providers to develop shared language to align the types and capsules to design an authentic assessment for educational leaders and carefully consider the setting of cut scores in the CalAPA. In recognition of the Commission's values and honoring the commitment of programs, I ask that we continue to consider the context in which aspiring administrators work and conduct the CalAPA cycles beyond serving in city, rural, and suburban PK-12 schools. They also work in a variety, including adult ed, newcomer centers, court schools, etc., and gather data, taking into consideration what leading for more equitable student outcomes looks like in diverse settings. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we go ahead and expand the public comment period to 90 seconds, please? Board Secretary, do we have other?
Yes, just one moment.
Thanks. Sorry, we just need time to adjust the blue sky timer.
Tanika Orange, please unmute your microphone and share your comment.
Hello, I'm Tanika Orange from UCLA Principal Leadership Institute, and I just want to highlight a couple things that we submitted into our public written comment that we did in conjunction with the Principal Leadership Institute at Berkeley as well. The first thing is to reiterate the appreciation again for all the folks that are working on this and the fact that we continue to have a standard setting committee, because it is really important to understand and hear from the field who have to implement this performance assessment. But a couple of things we highlighted in the letter that we sent for public comment, and this is really thinking about the future and where we go with the CalAPA. The first thing is just to consider the impact again and consistently think about the diversification of the field that we have with leaders coming into the field. And that anytime we think about raising of cut scores, it is really to make sure that we recognize that impact really affects those folks of color. And anytime there are any discrepancies between the increase in cut scores between any demographic group, it should cause us to really think about the impact in the field and make us stop immediately at that point, regardless of the demographics. The second point is to think about the correlation between the CalAPA and what it actually does in the field. For programs, we should be able to tell the impact. We should be able to think about retention. And I think this is what Amy mentioned, as we move forward with the CalAPA, to recognize what is the correlation between the impact it's actually having on what it says it's supposed to say, what it's supposed to do. And the last point is thinking about the notion of the implicit bias training that has been going on with the assessors. This is an important point, because in cycles 2 and 3, where there is actual, face-to-face contact with folks, implicit bias does not go far enough with assessors, that it does not address issues of racial bias, and even deeper than that, cultural bias, where communication styles and gestures come into play. And then if assessors aren't consistently really digging deep in cultural and racial issues, the implicit bias training just is not enough to help assessors understand what they're looking at when it comes to folks that are different from them around culture and issues of race. Thanks.
We have no additional requests for public comment.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment period. And commissioners, we're now open for comments and questions. Amy, should we be looking, there's many places we can look at in this document, but table 6 specifically? Would it be helpful, commissioners, if you guys put that slide up?
Yeah, we can go back.
Otherwise, you can just look in the document that you have for the agenda, and it's on page 9. Am I right, Amy? Yeah.
Well, slide 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll bring that slide back up.
Okay. So as a reminder, our action item is to determine the cut score and then to recommend it. So keep going back, you guys. There we go. I think, oh yeah,
The next one.
they like the other one.
Right there. Okay.
Thank you.
Right there.
Okay. All right. Commissioners, questions or comments? Yeah, please, Commissioner Clapp.
I actually just have a question that was brought up. I saw it in the letter from our previous speaker, and it was the recommendation to go beyond an implicit bias training. And in the recommendations in the letter, they spelled that out, talking about kind of more of a screening process and ongoing process to evaluate the assessors. And I'm just curious, do we have that in place in other assessment programs that we know of or assessments that we do? And I mean, to me, that was just a very interesting suggestion or recommendation there. And I'm just curious if we can do that. Are we already doing that in other places? So if anyone could speak more to that, I would be interested.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. So thank you. We started developing our implicit bias, particularly for performance assessment work, because exactly of the issues that Tanika pointed out. And we wanted to ensure that all of our assessors were considering their own implicit bias. We all have bias, and the understanding is that we need to identify that bias and set it aside as we score in particular. And we had some training early on in the early years during our pilot and field tests, for example, that was more related directly just to scoring issues of bias. And we realized we needed to go much farther, and we developed an hour-long implicit bias that many of our lead assessors that have worked in our administrative services credential area that had deep experience in bias training and working with issues related to race as well as ethnicity as well as culture, work to help us develop this training, and they actually delivered it. And it was for both of our general ed work. Then as we came along with our education specialist work that we introduced to you in June, we require that training there, and we require it in our admin training as well. After the first year, for all returning assessors, we created then an additional component that we put them through. And this year, based on the conversations from our admin standard setting and the contributions that Tanika brought around this issue, we are working this year to move towards a sustained conversation with all of our assessors around implicit bias. So while we start them off with an hour plus experience in walking through what implicit bias might be like for them and how they might set it aside, particularly in relationship to scoring a performance assessment, we realize that really this is a conversation that should be ongoing, and we hope to bring it into our work that we do on an ongoing basis, month to month, with our lead assessors, our supervising assessors, and our assessors. So it is in place across our the commission's performance assessments. You're welcome. Great question, Commissioner Platt. Thank you. And also as a reminder, starting around table 15 is where all the data is disaggregated as well. Is that correct?
Yes.
Commissioner Garner-Shire, and then Commissioner Davis, did you have your hand up? Okay, thanks.
Amy, thank you and the staff for this item. I had two questions. Let me start with the one that is probably the easiest one. What's the uptake on all the support that you all are providing for the field? Who's that? It seems like you have a pretty comprehensive set of supports in terms of office hours and this Meredith Fellows Conference. Is the field responding and taking advantage of this? That's the easy question.
Yeah. Yes, I think they are. And we would love to see more people come and participate, but there's definitely a growing community of practitioners. And every year, we grow in our capacity. So as we've been building on our performance assessments, we've been bringing more and more, for example, into this conference. So this year, it's not only our general education performance assessment, it is our education specialists who are just coming online with this, and our administrative services and our early childhood partners, as well as we're building out our formative permit level performance assessment. So it's a growing community, and we invite all to come be with us. And there has been great, for those who come, we've gotten very high remarks and feedback. We try to evaluate everything we do, and we constantly say to the field, if there's anything else you think would be helpful, if there's any other way we could offer these supports, let us know. So for example, we've moved a lot of our work in this way to after school hours and on weekends. To try and accommodate, to really make sure that it works for our educators who are working all day. So things like that have been helping. Yeah.
Can you give a ballpark guess of the percentage of admin programs that are taking advantage of?
I think I'll ask Gay Roby, you're still with us?
I am. I'm back with you.
Gay, you would be probably a little bit better to answer that question about sort of the percentage of programs that are joining us and is it growing and things like that. So
Our candidate hours that happen weekly.
I think you're still on mute, Gay.
I'm not.
Try again.
It shows me as unmuted. Can you hear me yet?
Yes.
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you. For our candidate hours, that tends to be a revolving door where any candidate can call in. We usually have 1 to 2 a week, not tremendously a lot. Our program hours in the mornings on Thursdays, we tend to have our regulars, and then every once in a while, someone else will pop in as well to ask a question. Our implementation conference, we are currently standing at about 200 registrants, so looking at a lot of participation there. So our coordinator meetings are almost 100% attendance that we have been holding quarterly, making sure that everyone gets all of the messages. I have a listserv that I keep track of folks and send out communications that are in PSD News or just updates of the programs as well.
I would ask that the staff over time can paint this picture, because hopefully the field will grow in terms of the percentage of folks who participate. And then I also had a question about the implicit bias training, and given some of the feedback from the field, the question is that enough? Is implicit bias training the only kind of culturally responsive training that we want to provide? And I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are, and in addition to the 1 hour of training and the sustained conversation, what else can we be doing to ensure that the assessors are truly coming to this work, understanding their own biases, but also understanding the communities that they're working with?
Okay, sorry, I apologize. I think really we need to do this in collaboration with our program coordinators and with candidates and whoever would like to come and join us in that question, Marquita, Commissioner Grenishire, because we're doing what we can from sort of the performance assessment lens, of the measurement lens of how do we help mitigate this type of bias in assessor scoring, particularly when we have video recordings and we can see candidates and we can hear candidates. So we are working to do that. And if there should be additional trainings around this, I would assume the answer, I would answer yes. Yes, there should be much more conversation, communication, work together to make sure that we are not introducing any kind of opportunity, I guess, for a candidate to not engage or a program not to engage in a way that would be really fully beneficial to that candidate and help increase who comes into the field, making sure that we really are representing all viewpoints and all candidates. So we would certainly be open to any other types of cultural training that the commission could be involved with offering. But really, I think one of the things that we've really learned about our we were doing these like every other month, and we're down to like 4 times a year, but these now called Digging Deeper conferences. These are opportunities for the faculty and those who support candidates to come in and talk to each other. And it's when the commission offers those kinds of opportunities to bring the community together to talk to each other about their expertise that I've seen the most value, frankly, amongst them. And we certainly could do some evaluation and ask those questions of our participants to see. But you bring up a really great point, and we would be completely supportive and open to doing more in any way that we can. And we will be looking, like I said, this year at our implicit bias and looking hard at these questions that are coming up around considerations tied to what happens when an assessor sees a candidate, hears a candidate, and are we paying enough attention to the ways we hear things and see things differently, and be supportive of all of our candidates to the best of our ability. So I probably didn't answer your question, but I would, it's a great question, and it's a question we should continue to work on together. And Gay, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I think I would add that our assessors go through a monthly validity training that is for every cycle. And they are an opportunity to look at one or two specific submissions and talk about the issues that were found there. And oftentimes bias issues come up, and they just talk around how the scores can be calibrated amongst assessors, and it helps them understand their own biases and move forward and assess those without looking through a biased lens.
Amy, you did answer my question, and I appreciate your openness and willingness to think broadly about this, especially in the context that our schools are in right now. And I don't have to paint that picture to this group around the table. It is critical that our leaders have a culturally responsive social justice place from which they make their decisions. And so I'll be eager to know more. This area of assessment is not an area of expertise for me, and I look around to my fellow commissioners or to the field who can help guide this moving forward. So thank you.
Commissioner Davis.
Good morning, everyone. And thank you again to your department, Ms. Rising, for all of the wonderful work that you all do. And I know that another action item is coming soon, or another item is coming soon with the data that I asked for last time, or requested last time. So the data here is really encouraging, and I want to say that, and then pivot back to the implicit bias lens that you use to train the assessors. What would a scoring process be like for a particular APA? So would that assessment be assessed by, say, 2 or 3 assessors? Would there be a blind read kind of situation? Would the video be seen by a particular assessor, whereas the written aspects be looked at by other assessors? I mean, creating that space of where we mitigate as much implicit bias as possible. How is that working? Because I know with National Board Certification for Teachers, it's often split between several assessors. The children's identities are not revealed. The teacher's identity is not revealed. There are no names associated with it. There are no schools, no communities associated with the writing itself. So it is totally up to the assessor to look objectively at what is presented there in the components. So is it similar, or?
So can you hear me? Now you can hear me. Thank you for that question. That's a very interesting question. In our current process, and it's not to say that we can't change over time, it is an individual who holds the appropriate qualifications, so has to have a California Administrative Services credential and recent experience in the field. They go through a very elaborate training where they look at multiple submissions. They get trained on how those are scored across all the rubrics, be they written components, video components, etc. And then they have to score on their own and meet a calibration, which means they have to be within a score point or within 2, which is pretty rigorous in order for us to say, okay, you're now calibrated and you may begin scoring. So an individual scores the whole set of responses to an instructional cycle. We do have specific assessors for cycle 1, then other specific assessors for cycle 2, and then others for 3. It's too much to hold all that, we believe, across. So all along, we've only, you get to score 1 cycle. and you become an expert in that cycle. You do have implicit bias, and then a training and support. And then as we go through the year and we're scoring every month, we have a very elaborate system where if there's a submission that comes in that an assessor is concerned about in any way or feels they are biased toward and cannot score, it moves up the system to supervising assessors who then can score it. And if they can't see how to clearly score it, it can move up to what we call lead assessors. And at each one of those levels, those assessors continue to engage in monthly dialogue and look at submissions, and if they need to bring them forward. If it's a true situation that is really outside the realm of expected evidence, it can sometimes even come to commission staff. So we have that in place. We do have a particular number that are double scored every session to make sure that we have that reliability, and those who don't pass, who are at that score point of not passing, a number of those are also double scored. So all of those kinds of aspects are in place. This concept of having more than one assessor from the very beginning inside a submission score is not yet our practice, but we should think about that together perhaps and see if that would not also help mitigate bias. We do instruct our candidates not to tell us their school site or to use names of students. And sometimes they do that and sometimes they don't do that. So we help our assessors read through some of that. So we can always do better.
Thank you for that. And I've got just a couple more questions or comments. The first is, the double scoring is kind of what I was alluding to with the double assessing, but just a common practice throughout would be, in my personal opinion, the best case scenario. The other thing that I would think might bode well in the scenario of scoring would be having some sort of appellate process, because being a person of color, I get a score. I don't know exactly what to do with that. And then I think about the amount of effort I put in on an assessment. And then if I don't necessarily pass that assessment, like, do I have some sort of option to challenge what's there? And in challenging that, if you're challenging a single person's assessment of your assessment, you see what I'm saying? It's odd, but if there are 2 or 3 people, I can rest assured that maybe I've got a more reliable score from the commission or from the testing service that is assessing that assessment, because it's not a person saying I pass or fail. It is a group of people who meet around that. And I think that's an important factor here, because you cannot tell me that I can't be an administrator or I can't be a teacher based on one person's opinion. It just doesn't seem fair. And that's part of that bias training that I think needs to be there, but also the system in place to eliminate some of the implicit bias. You've got to have more than one person say this is okay or this is not okay. That's just, it sounds like a sound practice to me when it comes to assessing candidates. And then that process, however that assessment is given, the appeal process needs to be in line with that. For example, in the national board process, and I'm only speaking of that because I know that's a very rigorous process, everything is submitted electronically.
Correct.
The appeal, however, is pencil and paper, or you type it, print it out, and mail it in. So it doesn't align. So I cannot prove that I've electronically submitted all of my components on paper if I have a video of that showing me submitting them electronically on my computer. So that's a different type of bias. It's not necessarily cultural or race-based, but it shows that I put forth the effort to get it there. And if there was a computer error or glitch, it's still, we can do some sort of appeal investigation and figure out where my stuff went.
Right.
And sometimes, candidates are left deflated because they aren't able to meet those challenges of getting the documentation to you to submit that. So that's also another factor. And I know we can talk about hundreds of other ways that suggestions offline, but those are some of the ways that I think of right away at the front of my mind about what I experienced with candidates through Stanford and the National Board Program. Thank you.
You're welcome. I do want to reassure you that we do have an opportunity for candidates to appeal their scores. It is a whole different assessor, a second person who looks at that and rescores it. And then if there's an appeal again, there's yet a third person. And anytime a candidate has an issue submitting anything, we have had great technical assistance from our contractor. And if it really gets to a situation where a candidate is not understanding, often this can come to me. We will talk directly with the program. Programs are encouraged to really support their candidates through this process. They get to see their responses before they come in, et cetera. And when they do get their scores back, so that we're trying to help candidates really understand the qualitative levels of these rubrics so that when it comes back, they can sit with a faculty person, go through their work, discuss practice and the qualities of practice, and deeply understand what they need to continue to have support with from their program. And that is work that is ongoing for us. And that's the kind of work that we engage in through all these events that we shared with you. So we're hoping that no candidate leaves this experience not understanding. And it is really quite a small number who can't be successful. This is an untimed sort of open book. We even post examples of candidate responses for candidates to see ahead of time. We encourage programs to build libraries of performances so that they can share them and use them in instruction. The notion is not, are you getting it right or wrong? The notion is practicing until you are at performance level. And we deeply believe that everyone who gets enough support and practice can get to the performance level we need to see. So it's formative in that sense and inclusive in that sense. Is that always perfect for every candidate? Not always. And we work, and have very specifically worked with individual candidates through the process. So, but again, always open to new ideas about things we can do.
And one more thing,
yes.
Does that appeal cost an additional
There is
fee?
a fee. There is a fee, but often there are also situations where we waive the fee. And Heather, you're on the line with us from Evaluation Systems. I don't know if you want to add anything at this point around.
Yeah, I'll just add, if the score does change as a result of that appeal or score confirmation, that fee is refunded.
Thank you.
The other thing I can offer is that if a candidate has attempted the assessment more than, I believe, and Heather, check me on this, 2 times and they're not passing, then they get a voucher beyond that.
That's correct.
Okay. And also remember, in our budget item this morning, for the next year and hopefully the year after, there are no more fees for assessments. Fees are covered and candidates are going to engage in this work without that fee. So if for some reason in the past year or the past 2 years, they haven't been able to move through it, they can try again. There will be no associated fee.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Davis? No, okay, yeah, no, thank you for the follow-up questions. We have 3 in the queue. We have Commissioner De La Torre, Commissioner Simmons, and then Commissioner Francois and Commissioner Hartwick. So Commissioner De La Torre, would you like to begin with your question?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Martinez. So my question, I have a couple of questions. The first one is, in terms of the assessor diversity, are there any measures in place to ensure that the assessors are diverse, which would also assist with the implicit bias training?
Yes, we definitely recruit far and wide, and we invite everyone who meets the qualifications, holding that California administrative credential and having recency in their service in the work to come and be assessors with us. And as long as they calibrate, they can become assessors, and as long as they continue to engage. Evaluation Systems is tracking who our assessors are to make sure that they are representative. And again, Heather, I don't know if you want to comment on that part of the
Yeah, I'll just add that, and I think I said this last time I was with you, that we're working with not only the Pearson organization, but the commission to be able to summarize and release what those assessor pool demographics look like. As you can imagine, it is an employment issue because technically folks are employed by us in that capacity as a scorer, but we do want to be able to put together a summary of the diversity of our assessor pool.
Excellent, thank you. And my second question has to do with the scores. Was there a confidence interval of the average scores for all the subgroups to make sure that they fall within the same range? Or was it statistically significant between the different subgroups?
Yeah, I can address that. We do run those statistical analyses, which we did on this data set. And at the test level, there was one significant difference between ethnicity groups on the first leadership cycle. And we did present that to the standard setting panel, but that was between Asian score and Black score. That was the only significant difference that we had at a ethnicity level, at a total test score.
Oh, excellent, thank you. And I just want to commend you on I really appreciate all of the graphs and statistics and data. I just love looking at all that. It brings joy to my heart. So I appreciate all your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Commissioner Simmons?
Amy, whether the candidate pays the fee or not, the cost of the program is still of concern, because even if we're covering the cost of the assessment, that means that there's funds we can't allocate somewhere else. So one of the tests that we did over my years with the commission, they only did the second read if there was a negative result. So that is another option that we could have too. Like if they pass, they pass. And if it's a fail, then they get the second read.
Uh-huh. And Heather, do you want to speak to that? But that is what we do.
Yeah, I can clarify. We do double score around the cut score, David. So we do double score those candidate scores that are just above the cut score and just below, but we do not double score all failing candidate submissions. So that is something we can discuss with the commission in terms of a scoring model.
Answer your question. Commissioner Simmons, any other? Okay. Commissioner Francois?
Thank you. I will be brief. I will say I am loving this conversation. I appreciate the richness of the conversation. I want to give a shout out to the standard setting panel for provoking the conversation and bringing up some really important issues related to the CalAPA. So thoughtful. And for the staff for bringing that panel together. I also appreciate it, and I won't go over, Commissioner Martinez, you'll be glad to hear this, everything that was said about the implicit bias training. I just think it's always important for us to think about the depth, the breadth, and the sustainability of that kind of training over time, particularly given the world as we know it today. So Amy, I remember in the early days of the CalAPA that there was a lot of concern about the passing scores and the rates of passing among ethnic groups. And I wonder if you could give us a picture over time. Has any of that changed?
Yes. Yes,
What have you
that
noticed?
is a great question, and I'll begin, and then Heather, you can back me up here with the data that's in your appendices. But we have seen improvement in scores, and we have seen a lot less. In other words, we are not seeing difference in scores by ethnic groups that we saw at the very beginning. So it has improved. And specifically in your agenda item, I think it's in Appendix D, I think, where we have that data. Heather, is that correct?
Well, the place where I think it's most concisely summarized starts on page 10 in Table 7, because it gives you a side-by-side comparison of what we call modeled pass rates, but it gives you an idea of what's the impact of if a recommended cut score of 15 were implemented for leadership cycle 1. If we read across Table 7, the top part of Table 7 shows you that For example, 296 Black candidates would pass. That is 97%. And if we keep reading across, you can see 217 Asian candidates, 99%. Down on the continued part of Table 7, you can see where 1,166 Hispanic candidates, that's 97%, and 1,937 white candidates, that's 98% would pass. So we presented all of this to the standard setting panel. We presented these for each of the leadership cycles. And that was actually a robust part of our discussion on day 2, because the comments that were discussed during public comment and in the letters were addressed at that meeting as well, in terms of what are the differentials that we're seeing across ethnicity groups. And as you can see here, there has been improvement since the beginning of the program when it was launched, and that the cut scores recommended took into account trying to achieve a comparability across ethnicity groups.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for pointing out that table with the concise information. Commissioner Hartwick?
Yes. Thank you. I appreciate all the discussion that we've just had. Now, I was hoping to turn to looking at the recommended cut scores and discussing those and understanding some of the recommendations of the panelists. Okay. I'm going to attempt to say a general comment and then look at them individually. As I look at the data that's presented in Table 7 and in Appendix D, I'm having some difficulty understanding why the cut scores aren't 1 point above for each of the cycles. So when I look at the data for each of the cycles, it looks to me like the major drop-off point is 2 points above, at least, for each of those cycles. And so I wanted to look through that because I'm trying to understand why it would have been set at the lower level. So for example, when we look at cycle 1, the initial recommendation, I understand the panel was 16, but then they moved it down to 15. But when we look at the overall modeled pass rates, the overall modeled pass rate is 0.98 for 15 and also 0.98 for 16 and 0.97 for 17, and actually doesn't drop to 0.93 for 18. I'm going to give this as an example so that we can look at it. And then additionally, when we look at the ethnic breakout, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm looking at Appendix D.
Is it table 15?
Is it table 15? Okay. Then when we go in and look at the ethnic and racial data to see if there's a significant difference there also doesn't seem to be a significant difference until that higher cut rate. So for example, for the Black candidates for leadership cycle 1, at a cut score of 15, it's 0.97, 16 is 0.97, 17 is 0.96, and then it's not until 18 that it drops down to 0.91. Yes. And it's similar for the Hispanic subgroup. So I maybe don't need to go through each of these because I think my overall point is going to be, I think we should have a discussion about whether we might be raising the cut score past what the recommended recommendations is, because when I look at all the impact data for all three, cycles, it doesn't look like the rubber hits the road for 2 points above what was recommended. So I wanted first to hear the insights from the panel about why they did that.
So the panel, we had many discussions together. And one of the concerns coming in the spring was still the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic and how do we know that's impacting data or not. So there was already a sensibility of really wanting to be supportive of candidates. That, you know, we had come back to you last August, and that was really very much front and center, and we didn't take any action at that time. You all did not take any action at that time. And you said, come back in a year and let's look again. So we came back in a year, but even then, and many other conversations. So really what our panelists became a little bit concerned about and why they ended up where they did, I believe, and then Heather and Gay, you can add your thoughts on this, is that when you look at the ends, the number of candidates, even though the percentage pass rate stays the same, we lose a few people each time. So we go from 296. So on table 15, at 15, we have 296 Black candidates. At 16, we have 295, we lose one. And when we go to 17, we have 291, we have 5 candidates then. And there was a lot of discussion about, we need administrators, we want quality administrators, and we're still learning about this assessment, and we're coming out of a pandemic, and we want to be very supportive of our candidates. And that's how the panel ended up at its first deliberations, and then at its second, as you can see on the screen, at 15, 14, and 14, meaning that we're going from a passing rate currently of 14 on cycle 1 to 15, 1 point higher, and then from 12 to 14 and 12 to 14. So we're taking a step forward in this recommendation, but still lots of sensitivity and support for candidates and programs as they continue to learn about embedding and supporting candidates in this performance assessment. And Heather or Gay, do you want to add any additional comments?
No, thank you.
So that's very helpful for me to have that context. So I guess that prompts me to have a process question of, is there a plan for us to be revisiting this passing score again like we did this time? I know that we had an opportunity, obviously, to come back and revisit it this time. When would be our next chance to revisit?
So in the item in our next steps and in our recommendations, we ask you to invite us back in 2 years to revisit potentially how we're doing as we continue to come out of the pandemic and we move into operational year 6 and then operational year 7.
Right.
All I can say is going all the way back to the early 2000s when we began with the performance assessment work in California, it was in place for almost 15 years before we moved into centralized scoring and having. So we are still sort of at our young years on the CalAPA, and people are still learning a great deal about how to really support candidates. And that was a very big part of our conversation.
Thank you. That is very helpful and helpful. Thank you for drawing my attention. I'd missed that about the returning in 2 years.
Yeah.
So I'll try to make this question brief. That sets my mind at ease more about the reasoning for this. I did have a similar question about the side conditions and I guess the lack of support for side conditions, particularly when I was looking at the side conditions and seeing particularly if you increase the side conditions to 2, no more than 2 scores of 1, that seems to have a very minimal impact on the number of folks passing at the given rates.
Right.
So I was also interested.
It was
in
a
whether
very
that was
similar conversation. And as they looked at the impact data, if a candidate was allowed to get 3 1s, 2 1s, only 1 score of 1, what happens? And as we looked at that data on allowing 1 score of 1, there was again a concern that we would lose some people and that we were not yet ready. The panel was not yet ready in their final deliberation, because in their first deliberation, there was more support for a side condition of only 1-1, which is the side condition, frankly, that we have in our TPA work for the commission's model. But again, lots of conversation and a determination finally after looking at the ends, not willing yet to apply a side condition. So you see in their final recommendation, that they were not going to recommend. So we had 2 of 15 recommending a score of 1 for leadership cycle 1, 3 of the 15 folks, and 4 in cycle 3 of the 15. So there just was not a majority support for that same situation.
And was there a discussion of not just strictest, which would be only allowing one, was there a discussion of allowing 2 scores of 1, or was that
There was
not
a lot
part
of
the
discussion, a lot of discussion about that. But when we got to polling everybody and coming to an agreement, they kind of, the strong sort of weighed out those who really thought, no, there should be no ones. When we provide the rubrics for you and you read the description at a 1 level performance, it's very low or negligible. There is no evidence towards the essential question we're asking about, basically, is a score of 1. So there was a lot of discussion about, well, could I get 5s on some of these rubrics and 3 runs or 4 ones and still pass? And are we okay with that? And what do we think about that? And because we don't have, we have those 4 steps in the model, and each step has a different number of rubrics. So they're slightly weighted in that way, in that model of investigate, plan, reflect, and act. But we don't, but other than that, our rubrics are treated identically from a measurement perspective. So it's 1.2, 3, 4, or 5, and then you've got to get to a total score. And so the determination was, we don't care how you get to the total score yet. You just need to get to 15. You need to get to 14, and you need to get to 14. And you can see those passage rates are well into the high 90s. 97% pass rate was the lowest we had at this time in this deliberation by this panel.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
very helpful for me.
You're
Thank you very much.
One of the great opportunities that performance assessment gives us is for preparation programs to look at these data and to see how their candidates perform, to see how many of them had more 1s than you would be comfortable with, and to adjust their program accordingly, right? That's a huge part of the agenda that this commission has set for performance assessment, is that program providers and faculty can use this to better understand how their candidates are performing these tasks. So continuing with these passing standards and revisiting them in 2 years gives us a chance at this table to continue to not put more pressure on candidates than we think the system is ready to put on them. But at the same time, put increasing invitation, if not pressure, on preparation programs to be looking at these data and getting to a deeper understanding of what's happening. What are the patterns of preparation and completion of program that lead some candidates to score 1s in places where we want them as practitioners to score 3s? What's happening? How do we sharpen? And where do we need to sharpen? And with whom and for whom? So the data are really shed light in a lot of different ways, and there's opportunity to use that to really strengthen preparation.
Thank you. Commissioners, are we ready for a motion or more questions? If we can go back one more slide. 1 second. So these are the recommended cut scores that are going to come up on the screen, and we need a motion.
No, other direction. It should be 15, 14, and 14.
Yeah.
There. Nope. Keep going.
I just had it up. So we'll get there. So we need a motion to revise the passing score standard for CalAPA for the leadership cycle 1 and for leadership cycle 2, and points for leadership cycle 3, and adopt an implementation date for these scores. So that's pretty much your menu right there. And we need a recommendation. We need a motion about the scores as well as the implementation date. And Amy, can you remind us what the recommendation is for the implementation date?
So our recommendation was for you to recommend one to us. So we would recommend, but I would suggest that we consider January 1st of 2023, or the recommendation of beginning our operational year 6. So that would be next summer. So really as of July 1st of 2023, that these new passing recommendations would go into place. So we would keep passing scores in place of 14, 12, and 12 in operational year 6, which has begun right now and will go through June of 23. And then when we get to July of 3, we would then implement 16, 12, and 12 for operational year 6. And that following spring, we would come back with data because we would have data from year 5, data from year 6, and then you could reconsider again if, you know, the data, the passing scores for each cycle, and the potential application of a side condition at that time.
Thanks. And before we go to a motion, do our higher ed colleagues have a preference for January of 2023 or July of 2023 in terms of your own academic calendars and implementation? That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I would propose July as well.
Okay. Okay. And I still look at Marquita even though she's a public member. Okay. So do I have a motion to accept the recommendations of our staff? And I'll go ahead and just read them out for CalAPA.
Monica, we have a hand up.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Commissioner De La Torre has.
Oh, we have a hand up. I thought she said a handout. I was like, we have a handout. Okay. Commissioner De La Torre?
I was just going to make that motion.
Oh, wait.
So
Can you repeat that?
I was just going to make that motion.
Thank you. So do I have a second? And do I have, I guess what the motion will be to accept the recommendation, to just keep life simple. And to keep the recommendation of the passing scores and to implement this in July of 2023. Do I have a second for that motion? Okay. Commissioner Hartwig. Recording secretary, I think we can move to a vote now.
Danette Brown,
Aye.
Jose Cardenas,
Aye.
Juan Cruz,
Aye.
Christopher Davis,
Aye.
Michael De La Torre,
Aye.
Marisol De La Torre Escobedo,
Aye.
Makita Gwino Shire,
Aye.
Megan Gross,
Aye.
Johanna Howick, Carrie Jackson,
Aye.
Bonnie Clark,
Aye.
Monica Martinez,
Aye.
David Simmons,
Aye.
motion carries.
Thank you so much. Yep. So the last item is 2E. But first of all, my apologies. Thank you.
Thank
you all for all of that. That was a lot of information and a lot of questions. I really appreciate the questions. Just reiterating Commissioner Francois' appreciation for the deep conversation around the cultural responsiveness and equity. And Johanna, thank you for your questions around the cut
And to
scores.
clarify, you would like us back in 2 years on this?
Yes,
Okay.
we would. Thank you.
Yeah.
We'd like to see you.
I'll be
We'd like
back
to
in
see
2
you
years.
before then, but specific to that topic.
Good luck with everything.
I don't think Mary would like if we, let them leave for 2 years. So, okay. All right. So, we're getting close, commissioners, to finishing this agenda. So the last item is 2E. Just keeping in the theme of performance assessment, education specialist teaching performance assessments, review and potential approval of edTPA and FAST. This item is being presented by David DeGuire, Mike Taylor, Nicole Marino, the Stanford Center for Assessment, Learning and Equity, and Julia Wallignier from Fresno State University. It is an information action item. Mr. DeGuire, will you please begin?
Thank you and good. Oh, I need to unmute. Okay. Thank you and good morning, commissioners. In addition to Doctors Marino, Pichon, and Walligner, who are joining us remotely, we also have in the room Kelly Crawford and Lori Kroger from Evaluation Systems Group of Pearson to help answer any technical questions you may have. This agenda item presents for your potential approval the edTPA and Fresno Assessment of Student Teachers, or FAST, teaching performance assessments for the mild to moderate support needs and extensive support needs credentials. The Commission acted in December 2020 to make a successful demonstration of proficiency on a performance assessment required for education specialist candidates as a requirement for the preliminary credential. And Education Code Section 44259 was amended to include this requirement. At its June 2022 meeting, the Commission adopted the MMSN and ESN versions of the CalTPA for operational administration beginning this October, established passing standards for initial implementation, and directed staff to conduct a second standard setting review study in spring 2024. The other two model sponsors with commission-approved teaching performance assessments, the Stanford Center for Assessment, Learning, and Equity, or SCALE, and Fresno State University are submitting the MMSN and ESN versions of their assessments for commission review and approval. As a reminder, in 2018, the general education forms of the edTPA, FAST, and CalAPA underwent a significant review for validity and reliability regarding the assessment design standards. The review was conducted by the Human Resources Research Organization, or HUMRO, and they found that while the assessments assess candidates in different ways, all three models met the assessment design standards. All three models were approved for use in California multiple and single subject teacher preparation programs in August 2018. The adaptations made by SCALE and CSU Fresno to the edTPA and FAST teaching performance assessment for the education specialist mild to moderate support needs and extensive support needs credentials did not significantly change these core models approved previously by the commission. So staff believe that the validity and reliability found by the HUMRO study will continue with the education specialist versions. So TPA models adopted for use by the commission must meet the commission's assessment design standards. The current assessment design standards were adopted by the commission in 2015 and updated in 2021. An overview of each of the three standards is provided in this item on page 2. So the review for the edTPA Special Education Handbook for California. In July 2022, a review of the education specialist version of the edTPA and FAST for mild to moderate support needs and extensive support needs consisted of two separate analyses. One was a content review and the other was compliance with the Commission's assessment design standards. The content review was conducted by subject matter experts and was based on Assessment Design Standard 1, Assessment Design for Validity and Fairness. For the edTPA Special Education for California Handbook for MMSN and ESN candidates, and the MMSN and ESN versions of FAST, reviewers found that each task on the assessment and their associated rubrics measure two or more of both the MMSN and ESN TPEs. And you can see the evaluation in appendices B, D, and F. Assessments are not required to assess all of the TPEs, but collectively, the tasks and rubrics for the assessments were found to address key aspects of the 6 major domains of the MMSN and ESN TPEs, and the performance assessment properly documented the relationship between the TPEs, tasks, and rubrics. Regarding the assessment design standards, SCALE submitted an addendum to their original submission to address design standards 1Q and 1R. With that addendum, the assessment was found to have clearly met all of the requirements in the assessment design standards, pending completion of the planned standard setting study. So that's the one thing they still need to do is their standard setting study. For the MMSN and ESN versions of the FAST, the assessments were also found to have met all of the requirements of the assessment design standards outside of the planned standard setting study and field test. Now, representatives from the Stanford Center for Assessment, Learning, and Equity, or SCALE, and Evaluation Systems will summarize the changes they made from their general education edTPA to develop the Special Education for California Handbook and their plans for conducting a standard setting study. So I will turn it over to Nicole Marino.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone. Morning, commissioners. I know you have the item in front of you, and so I will just briefly highlight the changes that we have done for special ed for the edTPA. Pulling up my agenda item here. So the edTPA, as presented on the agenda item, it was, has been developed, has been used across the country nationally, because edTPA is a national assessment. It has been used in California as well. It just wasn't consequential, so some programs were using it. It's just trying out, knowing that this day was coming soon. So a lot of programs have tried it out and given feedback. So with that design, of course, went vetting through design teams that were included with California for the national version, but also national, representation from special education groups as well. For the California version of this, we vetted this with universities, got feedback again from programs that were working with the MMSN and ESN candidates, and use that national version then to make changes in order to meet the California TPEs. And so just highlighting again what we've presented in the item. What we added was to make sure that the candidates do need to do collaboration. Collaboration initially wasn't part of the national version, and so we added that piece. We talked with special educators across California, working with a range of candidates, and talked to them about how collaboration is used, a key part of what goes on with special ed, and then how, a candidate that they were working with would be able to use those data to then work with, continue working with their students. And so that was one key piece. In addition, it requires that they identify a communication skill. Part of what the TPs requires that they work with on academic skill. And so for the candidates in the MMSN, the skill must be academic language. It requires that they use, for example, a focus for, even if it's a community setting, it's early literacy or early numeracy, but a goal that's focused on an academic skill. So that's included there as well. And then the other main thing, and again, we worked closely a lot with the commission over the years, was just to make sure that we were meeting all the requirements and requiring that the candidate does need to work with a learner that meets the requirements that are in the TPEs, so that there's an individual with, of course, an IEP, English learner, and as part of a group that's underserved or perhaps needs to be served differently according to the assessment design standard 1D. And so, David, I know that you also asked about standard setting. Did you want us to go over that as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
If you could just quickly give an overview, that would be great, what your plan is.
Sure. So I'm gonna pass that over to, if I know the folks that also work with us are part of evaluation systems. And so I'm not sure if will be Lori or Kelly that want to speak to that. And then we also have maybe some, but I'll ask them to speak directly to that, and I can chime in if needed.
Good afternoon, commissioners. Can you hear me? Good afternoon, commissioners, commission staff. I'm Lori Kroger with Evaluation Systems Group Pearson. I'm Senior Educational Consultant, and I provide support to California EPPs that are using edTPA. So a standard setting is scheduled for September 28th, if this is pending approval today, of course. So a group of California educators, both representing higher education, faculty and staff, and also P12 programs as well. So classroom educators as well, who have experience in working with candidates who will be seeking mild, moderate, and extensive support credentials. We will be convening a panel of them, and we'll be conducting the standard setting, and then we'll bring those results of the standard setting back to you in October.
happy to answer any questions about the standard setting. Very much follows the exact process you heard earlier today for the CalAPA. So same process, same standard, the set of events.
Thanks, Lori. We'll take questions after we finish with the FAST, presentation on the FAST. So now I will turn it over to Julia Wallneiter from Fresno State, who will summarize the changes that were made from the General Education FAST 2.0 to develop their MMSN and ESN assessments, as well as their plans for conducting a field test and standard setting study.
Good morning, commissioners. Thanks so much for having me here today. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, which is what always my preference is. But in line with the work Fresno State has done with other versions of the FAST, as I've spoken about in previous commission meetings, as David said, we worked to develop 2 education specialist versions, one that aligns with the mild to moderate support needs, TPEs, and one that aligns with the extensive support needs. As you can see in the agenda item, the 2 ed specialist versions build on the general education version, both in terms of the content and the format of the assessments and the systems already in place for providing orientations to candidates and coaches and involving faculty and coaches in the scoring of the assessments. As I talked about at the June meeting, one of the benefits that we see of having our own in-house performance assessment is it really allows for authentic involvement from the people who are supporting our candidates. And as Mary was talking about with the CalAPA, we have that very real connection to the data that can then inform the work we're doing with our candidates. So, and again, kind of along similar lines, these updated versions were developed in collaboration with our education specialist faculty. In terms of the actual content of the assessments, again, these versions build on the general ed version of the FAST, with the addition of specific directions that candidates take into account students' specific accommodations or modifications, specially designed instruction, primary modes of communication. Selected focal students must have IEPs. Throughout, candidates are responsible for identifying how their instruction aligns with students' IEPs and or 504 plans. Also included were explicit directions to highlight how the candidates would collaborate with appropriate stakeholders and other support providers to support their students. So really just keeping in mind what those TPEs are specific to the credentials and making sure to embed tasks within the FAST that are in line with those. A lot of the primary changes that were made to the ed specialist versions were in the rubrics, which were then revised to align with the mild to moderate and extensive support needs, teaching performance expectations. Appendix I in the agenda item actually has or includes those rubrics and highlights where the changes were made to address the appropriate TPEs. And as David said, both pilot versions were reviewed by commission staff and found to meet the assessment design standards. And so we are trying to move forward with our plans to conduct the pilot study and the standard setting study beginning this semester with candidates who are currently enrolled in our education specialist program. Those candidates who enrolled in January 2022, who will be scheduled to complete the program in June 2023, as they are in phase 2, which is when they can complete the first task, the site visitation plan. So the standard setting study for that would take place this semester, and then the standard setting study for the second and final task would take place next semester. Our plan for that standard setting study would be to bring together a focus group discussion of experts, kind of, again, similar to what was described earlier, but on a smaller scale because we are obviously operating at a smaller scale. What we envision is 2 faculty from our education specialist program at a minimum, 2 coaches who support our education specialist candidates, 2 mentor teachers who support our candidates, and 2 individuals from local districts who support our completers as they transition into the field. So those who are really familiar with what the completers who are in their beginning years of teaching. Our intent is that these invited individuals will review the collected samples, analyzing them using the pilot or the draft versions of the rubrics in order to identify what the rubric scores actually look like in a submission, ensure that everybody is clear on what a passing submission would look like. And then, as I said, we would again repeat the process with the teaching sample project. I think that pretty much sums it up, but I'm open to questions and happy to elaborate further. So thank you.
Thank you, Juliet. So commissioners, our staff recommendations are: 1, that the commission approve the special education edTPA for California handbook as having met the requirements laid out in the commission's assessment design standards for use with MMSN and ESN candidates. 2nd, that the commission approve the Fresno assessment of student teachers mild to moderate and the Fresno assessment of student teachers extensive support needs as having met the requirements laid out in the commission's assessment design standards for use with MMSN and ESN candidates respectively. And that the commission direct both model sponsors to conduct standard setting studies for their assessments and recommend standards to the commission for approval. Our next steps, if the commission approves the assessments, this will be first of all communicated to the field. In addition, staff will work with the assessment sponsors on completing their standard setting studies and bring an item back to the commission with the recommended passing scores. That concludes our presentation, and we would be happy to answer any questions commissioners may have.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to open up the public comment period for this item. So if you're here, please submit your card, and if you are on Zoom, please raise your virtual hand or press *9. And I'm going to turn over to the recording secretary to see if we have any public comments. Wanda? Rhonda, do we have any public comments? That's quite okay. We don't have
any public comments.
Okay, no public comments. So David was very clear about what the recommendations are from the staff. It's also on the first page of 2E of your item. Commissioners, do you have any comments or questions about what's being asked of us and what the process is to any of the folks who were so gracious to join us today to explain their process? Commissioners, anything? And let me look at my virtual hands too. Oh, do we have a public comment? Okay, all right. All right, so let's go back to, oh, good thing I didn't close the public comments. I forgot that step. I must have known. Public comments were never closed. Let's move forward.
Susan Green, are you still on the line? Susan Green? Nope, we don't have any, I'm sorry. Oh, hold on. No, it's panelist. It's Megan's pen. No. No, we don't have any. Thank you.
Okay, let's get a couple of minutes before we go on to the commissioners. Okay, I mean seconds, not minutes, sorry. Seconds. I know it's 5 till 12. I know, I meant seconds. Okay, I am going to officially close the public comment period, and we're now going to open up to the commissioners. And I see that Commissioner Gross has her hand raised. So Commissioner Gross.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing such a comprehensive overview of both the edTPA and the FAST. And so my only comment is similar to a comment I made yesterday, and that I hope when you're looking at doing your next revision of the edTPA and FAST for your general education candidates, that you consider including that collaboration piece. that we're including for ed specialists, because we really need our general education colleagues to make sure that they understand that they're a part of that equation as well, and not just have that ownership on our ed specialist candidates. So that's just my hope for the next time you revise that. And I don't know what that revision schedule is, but I just wanted to put that little plug in there. So thank you for your time.
Great, thank you. Other commissioners, any comments or questions? Okay. I will need a motion. So I need a motion to do what David said, but that is that the commission approve the special education edTPA, MSN, and ESN for California, the Fresno assessment of student teachers, mild to moderate, FAST, MMSN, and the Fresno assessment of student teachers, extensive support needs, FAST, ESN, as having met the requirements laid out in the commission's assessment design standards, and direct the sponsors to conduct standard studies for their assessments. Do I have a motion by Commissioner? Okay, Commissioner
Motion
Davis?
to approve.
Pardon me?
I said motion to
Great.
approve.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Davis. And I saw a second by Commissioner Greno-Shire. Any other discussion? Okay, will the recording secretary call for, I'm just gonna look at my virtual hands. Will the recording secretary call for a vote?
Danette Brown,
Aye.
Jose Cardenas,
Aye.
Juan Cruz,
Aye.
Christopher Davis,
Aye.
Michael De La Torre,
Aye.
Marisol De La Torre Escobedo,
Aye.
Makita Greno-Shire,
Aye.
Megan Gross,
Aye.
Johanna Howard,
Aye.
Terry Jackson,
Aye.
Bonnie Clapp,
Aye.
Monica Martinez,
Aye.
David Simmons.
Aye.
I think I saw Tina's here. Tina Sloan.
She is there.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Daguerre, Mr. Taylor, Dr. Marino, and Dr. Waltner. We appreciate your all's time today and the next steps you're going to take. All right, this is always the most disappointing things I have to share with you all, but having no additional items. I adjourn the Educator Preparation Committee.
Okay, thank you to the Educator Preparation Committee. I now reconvene the general session. Since we moved item 2F to a later date, staff, is there any public comment regarding item 2F? Yes, okay.
Yes, we do. Shilpa Ram.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shilpa Ram, and I'm a senior staff attorney at Public Advocates. Just wanted to respond to your
Shilpa, if you can give us a minute real quick to get the volume.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Shilpa Ram. I'm a senior staff attorney at Public Advocates. I just wanted to respond to your invitation to ask a few questions about item 2F to perhaps inform your discussion at the October meeting, if that's when item 2F will be heard. Hope that's okay. Thanks so much. First, page 4 mentions some gaps in education in conjunction with differences in exam scores among subgroups. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on what that means to you and share the steps you'd suggest to mitigate how such gaps may impact exam performance. Second, table 22 on page 29 shows considerable differences in the initial and cumulative pass rates for several subgroups. For example, 48.8% of men passed the RECA initially and 80.5% passed it after multiple attempts, which translates into 1,141 men who did not retake the test and perhaps pursued another career. Similarly, for African-American candidates, 48.9% passed it initially, 78.8% passed after multiple attempts, and 256 candidates did not retake the test. Page 37 of the report notes the perseverance of those candidates who managed to pass after multiple attempts, and that's totally true. However, the cumulative pass rates don't tell us whether candidates took an exam twice or 12 times times before they passed, whether they received test prep support or financial assistance to facilitate their journey, or what obstacles they overcame when they finally passed the test. And I'm also concerned about the large numbers of candidates that we appear to lose completely after their first attempt. The data suggests that there's more to be done. Finally, we're delighted to see that the Commission received additional funding in the budget to hire many new staff, including in the career counseling and data and reporting departments. Might it be possible for some of your new staff to look more closely at the exam pass rate data? For example, perhaps they could investigate what the cumulative pass rates represent, including the range of test attempts by subgroup, provide test-related career counseling, and examine the impact and quality of any financial, test prep, and/or emotional support that candidates may receive to help them pass a given test. Thank you so much for the opportunity to comment, even though the item wasn't heard today. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Ram. Any other public comments?
No, we don't have any.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 1I, new business. The bi-monthly agenda is presented for your information. Are there any audience presentations?
Yes. Harold Acor.
Hola, muy estimados comisarios. Quisiera primeramente dirigirles la palabra en español y tengo una razón por la cual. Hello, commissioners. I'm going to speak to you first in Spanish, and I have a reason for what I'm doing. So just for you don't think I'm just blathering on, all right? Quisiera hablarles sobre el concepto de literacy. Y tengo que decir literacy porque no tiene como ninguna traducción muy fácil en español. Y se lo encuentro muy interesante porque ustedes han hablado bastante sobre literacy durante esta junta, ¿verdad? Y lo que pienso yo, como antes era maestro bilingüe y siempre quiero quedarme al tanto de lo que está pasando en el mundo de la educación y de las investigaciones educativas. Y lo que encuentro muy interesante es que en México, el gobierno de México tiene el Departamento de Investigaciones Educativas y tuvieron que escribir un artículo en español sobre la complejidad de traducir el concepto de literacy. Y lo encuentro muy interesante porque uno de mis autores más preferidos es Carlos Fuentes. Y él escribió en El espejo enterrado sobre el otro. ¿Quién es el otro? Y él dice que el otro, si vemos muy profundamente al otro, vamos a conocernos a nosotros mismos. Y quisiera darles el desafío a los que sí pueden hablar español de leer este artículo sobre lo que es el literacy, porque ustedes tendrán que hacer muchas decisiones sobre literacy. Hay muchos grupos que quieren lo que quieren sobre literacy y yo creo que una cosa que se puede hacer es conocer desde otro punto de vista lo que opina uno sobre algo. Y también hablo alemán. En alemán decimos la Weltanschauung. Y esta palabra quiere decir como el punto de vista, pero también quiere decir que cómo uno ve al mundo. Y es muy interesante esto. Y solo quería darles el desafío de leer este artículo. Se lo voy a compartir con las damas allí para que puedan darles la información y decidir todos ustedes lo que es que quieren ustedes sobre literacy. So basically what I was saying is this, and I needed to say it in Spanish first because I wanted to make a really important point about our concept in English of literacy. Literacy is a concept that to me is really from well, to me, it's really from a high context culture of education here in the United States. And people in other countries are saying, what is this literacy thing that people are talking about, right? And English offers a lot of challenges for when you're trying to read and write in English anyway, because we basically stopped our spelling. I didn't even say this part in Spanish, but they had to write an article in Spanish in Mexico for the Department of Education called The Complexity of Translating the Concept of Literacy. And they have a whole article here. It's by Victor Jesus Rendon Casales. And so I'm going to share it with the staff here. Maybe they can share it with everybody. Try maybe to put it through Google Translate, but that's a dangerous thing, I'm just saying. But one of my favorite authors was Carlos Fuentes. And he wrote in The Buried Mirror about the other and how looking really at the other, sometimes you find yourself. So I think if you were to read this article and think about how the rest of the world is looking at us in the United States when we're talking about literacy, I just think it's a good mental exercise for all of us to then think about what it is that we're doing. What do we want? What do you want as a commission to do with literacy? Because what's basically will help us decide fundamentally, what is it we want? What are we going to do with literacy? And what are we going to put into the requirements do you have? So that was my roundabout way as a former AP Spanish language teacher and literature teacher to say, let's think about that and let's make sure that we do the right thing for literacy for all of our students. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Gracias, señor Eker. Aprecio mucho tu comentario. Y gracias por la tarea también. So we all have our homework assignment, to learn about this more. All right. Are there any other audience presentations?
Ann Wolf.
Hello, my name is Ann Wolf, and I am the constituent of Assemblyman Patrick O'Donnell. I want to propose that a student educator stipend be created. Thanks to the Commission's support of AB 130, I have been successful in satisfying the requirements of both the CBEST and the CSET, and I am now nearly done with phase 1 of my student teaching credential program, or my student credential program. The last wall I need to scale is student teaching. As you know, student teachers are required to obtain 600 hours of classroom experience over a 16-week period. This equals 37.5 hours a week. During this time, students are not paid, and they still have school tuition to pay, as well as keep up with all of their bills, which are rent, mortgage, utility bills, phone bills, gas, food, support, and supporting their children. And not to include a lot of other things. The only way you can be paid is for you to obtain an internship, which is very hard to come by. What can complicate things further is if you have a full-time job with benefits and you need to take a leave of absence in order to complete the student teaching requirement. This is my reality. I have tried to figure out if there was any scenario where I can continue to work my full-time job while student teaching, and so far I have not found any option. The scenario I keep coming back to is I'm going to have to take a leave of absence from my job, which means I will not receive a paycheck for those 16 weeks. And in order to keep my employer benefits, I will need to pay for them out of my own pocket. This adds to my financial burden and others, and I will face when student teaching. Recently, I became aware of a bill titled Removing Barriers to Educator Preparation that moved through the California legislature and has been newly signed by their governor. The bill's summary is the purpose of the Student Educator Stipend Program is to award stipend money to an eligible student to reduce the financial barriers of participating in required clinical practice as a student educator. An eligible student placed as a student educator in a 16-week academic residency may receive a stipend of up to $11,000. Before the pandemic, California was already facing a teacher shortage. The pandemic only exacerbated this issue. I think the writing is on the wall that the state of California needs to do something, and they need to think creatively on how to solve this issue. I am proposing that some of California's monetary surplus go to this program. Life does not stop when you're a student teacher, and there is only so much you can put away in your savings when you are also paying tuition and other life expenses. not to mention any emergencies that come up. California is one of the most expensive states to live in, and the cost of everything keeps going up. Asking someone to not be paid for student teaching might have been a small ask when it was first established. However, this is often too much of a financial burden to bear in today's world. California has always led the nation in innovative thinking. Colorado has already stepped up to the plate in recognizing that student teachers should be paid. I hope my plea does not fall on deaf ears and this issue is addressed this year. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Wolf. Any other audience presentations?
We do not have any.
Okay. I will now recess the general session. Members of the commission will go into closed session and the general session will reconvene after the closed session. I would like to reconvene the general session and move to agenda item 1H, report of closed session items. Closed session items, the commission granted the following petitions for reinstatement. Amanda Nunes, Sheena West, Hannah Silvers. The commission denied the following petitions for reinstatement. James Davis Jr., Lamar Sally, Commissioner De La Torre recused himself on this item, and Kim Balke. Commissioner De La Torre recused himself on this item as well. The commission adopted the decision and order in the matter of Charles Droelet. The commission reviewed the transcript in the following matters, and a decision and order will be prepared for the commission's adoption. The commission ordered a 30-day delay for preparation of the decision and order. For the following: Elia Cisneros, Christian Hansen, Lincoln Johnson, John Keller, and Kristen Meadows. The commission adopted the following proposed decisions: Bernardo Lopez and Elizabeth Flores. The commission rejected the following proposed decisions and called for the transcript. Thomas Gutierrez, Commissioner De La Torre recused himself on this item. Archer Nishioka, Kurt Wilkins. The commission discussed the following consent calendar items and accepted the recommendation of the Committee of Credentials. Number 59, Daniel Stidham. Number 65, Sherman Garden, and Commissioner De La Torre recused himself on this item. The commission discussed consent calendar item for number 82, Raymond Beltran, and granted the application. The commission discussed the following consent calendar items and remanded the matters back to the Committee of Credentials. Number 40, Roman Martinez, and number 55, Clement Satcher. And this concludes the closed session items report. I now adjourn the August 2022 meeting of the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. The next meeting is on October 13-14, 2022. Thank you all. Happy Friday, happy weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye, everybody.
Hi, everybody. Safe travels.
Just the latest.